far away, and the police are going.
What is this? Oh man! All right, let's go.
These are good.
These look good.
Take two. I know you. I don't share them with anybody.
These in front of Randy.
That's fine. I don't.
He doesn't like these. That's why I buy them. I can make them last.
I don't eat them. Yeah.
Huh.
They're good.
They look really good.
Believe me, they're good.
Dark chocolate sea salt.
Oh man, they're phenomenal.
Are they
Hello everybody, I'm sitting here with Randy Brown, the author of the Inside Story of Columbine, Lies, Coverups, Ballistics Lessons, available on Amazon in both paperback and Kindle editions. So let's just take a second here to introduce you to our listeners. Can you talk a little bit about yourself to the audience and sort of get a sense for who you are and where you're coming from?
Sure. Who we are really is not important. We're nobodies in this story. We just happen to be the couple, the family that turned Eric into the police before Columbine happened, and a number of times. The number varies depending on how you want to add it up, but it was 13 or 17 times for different crimes that he was investigated for. And our son was the boy who left the school, who Eric didn't shoot in the parking lot, and who then the sheriff named as being involved. That's Brooks Brown. And just as a comment on that, when Eric let Brooks go in the parking lot, Brooks's brother was in the cafeteria, sitting a table or two from one of the propane bombs. So anyone who thinks that Brooks is involved in this, or Brooks was a conspirator in this, that's an absurd thing to think. Brooks loved his brother. He wouldn't have left him in the cafeteria. It was the police who tried to name Brooks as a conspirator and co-conspirator falsely to cover their own actions.
Right.
And all that, to anyone who's not followed this, which of course we have because it was our family and we got involved in trying to find out the truth. Anyone who thinks Brooks is involved in this or was in any way involved in this just doesn't know the whole story. You've heard the beginning,
right,
and you've heard the lies of the sheriff, but you've never followed up on the rest of the details. Then my wife and I got involved, and we knew the Klebolds, we didn't know the Harrises, but indirectly. And then my wife and I got involved with the families because, and Brian Rohrbaugh especially, Brian and Lisa and Sue and Rich, in trying to discover what really happened here, because we all found out there were lies. And that just led Judy and I on this 7-year investigation into what happened at Columbine. And I've continued it since then. Judy got away from it because it was just too sad to do, but I've kind of kept it in my office and worked on it once in a while. And I kept journals from the beginning, not very consistent journals, but journals, just on what happened and how I felt. It was the way I dealt with the sadness. And that's what the book is. The book is the journals, because it does tell a story of what happened if you're involved in something like this. It's a very interesting story that way.
Right.
But I'm sorry, I won't click the pen anymore.
No, it's totally cool.
I read about this, and I read and learned, instead of not only just investigating what had happened and what they lied about, and demanding the truth and filing Freedom of Information requests for years, and then analyzing the information released.
Right.
We cataloged all that information. Judy and I read it, marked it up, gave it to Brian, and we would get our own copy and mark it up and leave it for us. Then I started reading, trying to learn why these things really happened, and that's the reason I wrote the book and finished the book. It isn't to make heroes of Eric and Dylan, out of Eric and Dylan. It certainly is not. They're not heroes. It is to try to show people what happened, the sadness involved, and the ramifications of the ripples that went out of sadness and depression. But it's to show people how to stop this, because it's not that common an event. School shootings, they don't actually happen every day. They're not that common an event. More lives are lost in gang shootings and other things all over the country. We just choose to ignore those because, those aren't white kids in a subdivision, I guess. It's a very odd thing to me. But there are reasons for violence, and there are reasons that Eric and Dylan did this. There are reasons that children in the violent suburbs, like Chicago and others, kill other children. And yes, it's drugs, but it's more than that. And that's
Right.
what I researched. And that's why I finished the book. I wanted people to know about those things. That became so important to get that information out that even though I was very ill, I finished the book, and it motivated me to finish the book, which was very difficult to do. Back to the book, going back to the journals and even just reading them is very depressing and sad.
Right.
So there had to be a motivation to finish it, and that's what it was.
And I think what I'll do is I'll link, with your permission, of course, the YouTube video you created,
Sure.
just to kind of give people a sense who may not know.
You absolutely should. I apologize in advance that it wasn't videotaped any better. I was holding the phone, and then as I was reading stuff, I'd get distracted thinking about what it was.
Right.
And because there were, I know where Gardner's bullets are, but there were so many things. As I would, as I'm going through the library of information we have, I would get lost in this photo and wait, the one that shows Gardner's where he fired his bullets, and the one that shows the police bullets. I have so many of those, and I didn't organize it to do a video. I just filmed it to show people the resource material. And I don't want to name the museum yet, but I've talked to the curator. She's just amazing. And they're going to archive the material, preserve it, and then it'll be public can see it. This will give them, without question, well, the truth is, there's no library of information on Columbine like the one I have
Right.
that I'm giving them.
Can you try to take our listeners to the beginning of your experience with Columbine in general, but maybe start with the first time you met Dylan Klebold?
Oh my gosh, see, this could take hours. Judy was sitting in the kitchen, or working in the kitchen, and she heard noises downstairs. And someone had opened a window in the house, and she looked out the window and she saw a local kid running away from our library. She knew who it was, so she called the police. She went down, and the policeman came and went down and talked to him. The kid's name doesn't matter, it's not Eric or Dylan. The police were incredible. He went down there, he scared this kid, he talked to this kid, he talked to the mother. The mother was involved. She found the stuff that he'd stolen, they returned it. It was a great experience with the police. We trusted the police. When Columbine started, I had a friend from Chicago who said, "Randy, don't trust the police, they will lie to you." And I went, "Jim, you don't know what you're talking about. That's not the police here. Maybe that's not. These people are honest. They never do anything like that." So, we'd known Dylan for years. Dylan was in this room. Dylan stood over in the family room and watched play videos that they did for Mrs. C and laughed with the whole cast. Dylan was a great little kid. He played the drums in the library when we had the band. Dylan was a cute, nice, little, gentle little boy who was very shy and had no confidence. I can see him playing the drums, and it's tentative. It's tap, tap, and because he's just afraid of making a mistake and afraid of being made fun of. And all the other kids in the room, these are all nice kids, no bullies, and they would make a mistake and they would stop and they would all laugh. It was so much fun to listen to. And then they'd start the song again. And it was Mr. Stugart who taught him the song. It was some jazz thing. We have videos of it. It's so poignant to watch. It's very sad.
Right.
But the kids were so much fun. There was no teasing. And I'd go down and I'd go, "You guys sound great." And I'd go, "Dylan, what a great drummer." And he'd get loosened up and he'd start to drum and you could see the confidence build. It was a great experience for him. And we did that every time we were with Dylan. You had to pull him out of his shell to get him to be open. And I don't believe he was abused at home. Not physically ever. I don't think they would ever physically abuse him. That was Dylan. And Dylan was just a nice, gentle kid. Now, he was sensitive. He didn't like to be criticized, and he would take it personally. But I understand that. He was a young, and he was a little pudgy and soft, and and a nice kid, and he played with the kids really well. And Dylan's brother would be over here, and they would play together. There was this split in ages, just like that. Bricks and Aaron, and Dylan's brother and Dylan, and it was just like that. So they all got along, even though Aaron was the youngest. Aaron was mature, so he got along great with him. And
the reason I asked that, Randy, is sort of get a sense of the Dylan you knew prior to April 20th.
That's the Dylan I knew.
Right.
Oh my gosh, Dylan had a great smile. It was infectious and it was real. It wasn't, it was his whole face, and it just showed his joy of life and his happiness, which I know it makes no sense at all. This is why everyone who knew Dylan, and I mean without question, every friend of Dylan that we know, my kids, Judy, no one could believe that Dylan would do this. We knew Eric would do this. Eric was angry and an injustice collector, but for Dylan to do this made no sense at all. It still doesn't make sense. I had more trouble accepting Dylan's involvement in this than anything else in the entire research I did, and it wasn't until I went through some of the ballistics information and what they did in the library that I realized how cruel and horrible Dylan was. Dylan killed innocent children in the most violent ways possible. So there were two Dylans. There was the initial nice little kid, and then there was the killer in the school. And if anything motivated me to understand and to read more, it was that. People say Eric was crazy. I don't believe that. I believe Eric was created by his environment. But then they're going to say Dylan is crazy too. We had two crazy kids happen to shoot up a school, and every other school shooter in every other school is crazy. That's not it. It's Dylan was changed from this wonderful, loving little boy that I still love to this horrible killer. And there had to be a reason.
Right.
And that's why I studied and read about it. I wanted to know that reason. So that's the Dylan that I knew.
And one more thing I want to ask about Dylan and your experience and impression of Dylan. Let's just say politely that Dylan may not have been the strongest guy on the block, right?
No, it's not like Eric was the weakest guy on the block.
Right.
Eric was 5'7", 125. I mean, I forget what he was when he died. 130 maybe? But Dylan was tall, but Dylan was just not aggressive and mean.
Right.
I know that doesn't make any sense. People watching and listening aren't going to just understand that, because something turned him into this killer.
I only ask that to sort of get a sense because I know that on certain forums and message boards and certain books, and people who look at this event say, oh, I mean, look how tall Dylan was. He had to be a bully, right?
Oh, and Dylan, well, that'll get into the bullying. That's a whole different thing.
Right.
But Dylan, even on his license, this is fascinating, listed his weight as 185. He was 6'4" or 5. But in his autopsy, he's 152. He's 6'4" and 152. He exaggerated his weight 30 pounds, or the autopsy's an error.
Right.
But when you get your license, that's a claimed weight. They don't weigh you.
Right.
So
right.
I'm 6'4", 185. I'm the guy I think I am.
Right. Right.
But not, his autopsy weight's 30 pounds lower than that.
Right. Who look at this in a very simple way, say things like, well, they say a lot of things, but they say things like, oh, they weren't bullied, right? And we'll get into that. But specifically, they say, oh, I mean, look, who's going to bully Dylan Klebold, right? He's 6'3", right? But that doesn't take into account everything else that bullying can be. Being
tall doesn't mean you're tough.
Right.
And especially, that's understanding the school and the bullies at the school. Now, they're not the football players. Some of the bullies were football players.
Right.
There was one major bully at the school, and then there were 3 or 4 other sub-bullies.
That's
yeah, I don't like to use name.
Right.
He's grown up now. He has 2 kids.
Right.
He lives in,
Right. He's just emblematic of the whole culture and the whole issue.
I agree. Although he was a scary person.
Yeah.
I saw walk by once at a football game, and I was quite surprised. He was one of the toughest looking, widest, strongest people I've ever seen. And he actually displayed the aggression.
And again, like, when you're in that culture, and we'll get into that in a bit, but when you're in that culture, in that school, and you almost have like an unlimited leash to do whatever you want, right? In terms of...
Oh, yes. Isn't that, that's in here.
Right.
In this cheap little book from 1984 or whatever it is.
Right.
That's Lonnie Athens talks about that.
What was your sense of Dylan's home life? I know you talked about that a little bit.
Dylan's life at home is not what is written in Sue's book. Okay, this is very important for people to know. I knew Sue and I liked Sue, but Sue's book is written by Sue so that she can survive this tragedy, and to find meaning in this tragedy for her, it has to be that Dylan committed suicide and she's going to stop suicides, and that's a great way to find meaning and to make your life give your life a purpose. Okay. So I understand that, but if you're going to write a book and you're going to tell the story of your son who is a killer and then committed suicide or was killed by Eric, if you want to debate that point, there's no debate to me. Eric killed Dylan without question. Then you should at least tell the truth. And to be honest, Sue's book has. I ordered Sue's book the minute it came out. And waited for it. I got it. I read it the first night sitting in that chair right there, all the way through. And as I would read something, I'd go, Judy, listen to this. What the hell? And I would be so upset. And then after about 5 of those, she said, Randy, would you please stop? I can't think about it right now. I'll read it when you're done. So I said, I'm going to highlight stuff so you don't miss it. Well, that was stupid. She can read. So many things are highlighted in the book, it almost became a joke at the end. It was like, well, why am I even highlighting? There's so many things that she just didn't tell about that are very important. And they're very important, forgetting about Sue, but to understanding Columbine, the process of violentization. They're very important, showing Dylan's process through the violentization stages where he's bullied, so then he starts to fight back in small ways, and then he starts to develop this persona of someone who can fight back with the black coat and the sunglasses, to the point where they're at dinner, and I don't even know if this is in Sue's book, and Sue says, Dylan, you need to take the coat and the sunglasses off. They're scaring people. And he just kind of looked at her and kept them on because he liked that feeling of the power it gave him. That's part of the process of violentization. And that's that, and see, all the other hundreds of things that we know fit this concept that, and it's more than one concept. It's humiliation, hypervigilance, and violentization. And the way that those three react, and the process of going through those that develops school shooters. But if she had written about those things, then people reading this could go, and then when they read other things, they go, wait, that fits exactly what Sue said. I just learned something about why this kid did this, and the process of why he became so angry. It wasn't that he was crazy. He was reacting to the bullying that he was experiencing, and he was fighting back. And that answers the question. People go, well, Dylan was the bully, they were the bullies. Well, they weren't the bullies. That's laughable if you knew them. Eric couldn't bully my wife. My wife could beat up Eric, seriously. Eric was 5'7", 130 maybe, 125, and had a low self-image. He had the caved-in chest problem that had been fixed, but it was still there with him mentally. And so these kids weren't bullies. They were bullied, but they bullied other kids in a response to the bullying. It was a way of saving face.
Right.
It's part of the violentization process. And so if she had just told the truth in the book, it would have helped. And that's why I know it's awful to say that the book is a lie. Most of the book is a lie. And it matters because people read it and they go, oh, there's no reason why Dylan did this. You've got to be kidding me. Of course there's a reason Dylan did this.
Right.
And she just didn't say it because she doesn't know what it is. Barbara Walters stood right here to get Sue's interview. She came over to our house so that we would get her an interview with Sue. That's how important it was.
Right.
That was the get. That was the best interview. And yes, Sue didn't tell the truth. She waited and waited, and then she put out this book, and now she's doing these, and she's not telling the truth about it. And that, I find that sad.
Right.
I find that disappointing. And I know it sounds awful for me to say that. I was a friend of hers. You know what? The truth matters more than anything else.
Right.
And I find that sad because we're talking about children's lives here.
Right.
Telling the truth on why this happened, that matters. That matters more than whether your feelings are hurt.
Right.
Or whether, you can't admit your responsibility. I admit my responsibility for Columbine and being involved and not doing enough. I put it in the book. I admit that I'm probably responsible for this to some degree, for my failure to do my job as a parent, protecting my own children. And I still feel that way. Believe me, that guilt doesn't go away. But I admit to it and I face it, and that's what you have to do. Sue has to face what happened here and what turned Dylan into the monster Dylan became. Our kids' lives already lost now because it took me this long to come out with the book and to try to, we did the best we could on getting out the truth about Columbine. I put out that one video in 2015, I think it is. That's been 5 years. We've tried to tell the truth about this. That's why I wrote the book. I wanted people to understand the whole story and explain it where they can get this. Because once you understand it, it's not that complicated. It's pretty simple. Now you can take these things and you can go, we can stop the next school shooting just by taking these actions.
Right.
We can stop suicides in the school. We can change this environment in a school and make the world better. We don't need to take away all the guns. You don't need to have 5 armed guards and armed teachers, for God's sake. Arming teachers is like, I can't think of a more stupid idea to protect children in a school. Amateurs in a school with frickin' weapons that they don't know how to shoot.
Right.
The SWAT team at Columbine didn't know what they were doing. They fired into the school, 167 rounds into the school, at unknown targets. You gotta be kidding.
Right.
Oh my gosh. And then this is, I wrote about this in the book too. When you're highly activated like that, you're thinking of the school shooter. You're shooting at him, and you're myopic. You're not seeing what is around him or what is behind him. This is just like at the STEM school shooting. The guard there fired when he saw the barrel of a policeman's weapon. He fired at the barrel of the weapon, not even seeing the policeman who's behind the wall, and injured 2 children. Now the kid in the school killed Kendrick, and that's what a brave kid that Kendrick is. Oh my gosh, Kendrick Castillo, what a hero.
Yeah. And
the other kids in the school that took down those kids, but the guard shot 2 children. Adding weapons to a school is not going to help. But back to the point. If Sue would tell the truth, then people could go, wow, I didn't know that. Dylan became more violent and started acting up, and he was even aggressive to his mom, and they had problems, and they fought all the time in their family. So there were signs here that, well, that's what's going on in my family. Maybe I need to pay more attention. That's what Sue's book could have done and didn't do. The Harrises could tell the world why school shootings happen if they would just tell the truth.
Right.
And the things they ignored and the mistakes they made. The same with the Klebolds. That's what's in my book is the mistakes I made. I tell all of them. Believe me, I faced them.
Right.
It was important to face them.
Moving on from Dylan, your sense of Dylan, let's shift gears now to Eric. Do you remember the first time you met Eric? Like, sort of give us, the audience, your general sense for what kind of kid he was.
Well, here's the deal. I'm not sure I met Eric that often. My family dealt with Eric. When Eric came over to apologize for breaking Brooks's window, Mr. Harris parked up front, and I'm at work. And he came to the door, and my wife sent the kids to the bedroom, and Judy talked to Eric. And he said, Mrs. Brown, I'm sorry I broke in. And Judy said, that sounds great, Eric, but I know you're lying. I'm going to warn the neighbors, we don't trust you, stay away from, and Eric got red-faced and hated Judy from that point on. And Mr. Harris stayed in the car, which I think is bizarre. You send your kid into, and you know what else Mr. Harris didn't do? Didn't offer to pay for the broken windshield. His son broke the windshield and admitted he did it. And Mr. Harris sat in the car and never took responsibility for it. That's unbelievably bad parenting.
Right.
But that's just one example of many I can give you.
Right.
But so when Eric broke the windshield in the car,
Yeah.
Judy went down there. The kid told her what happened. Judy picked up his backpack and had it in the car, and another friend of Brooks's was in the back of the car. This is Judy's car, not Brooks's, with the broken windshield. And Judy's driving away, and Eric went nuts because Judy had the backpack. Well, we didn't know Eric was planning on killing people and had his journal in the backpack, but we didn't go through his backpack. She drove it up to his parents and dropped it off. And Brooks went up and told Eric's parents about the window well outside his window where he stored all his liquor.
Yeah.
It's a window well outside there in the window in the basement, a window well. He had dug it out and put a little thing in there to store his liquor. Well, that's where he kept some of his pipe bombs too. Not that he made any effort to hide his pipe bomb. That's one reason they didn't show the basement tapes, because the basement tapes clearly show. There's a video of, let me remember, I think it's Dylan filming Eric, as I remember. It might have been backwards, but it's Dylan filming Eric, and Eric's going, "Oh, hi, Mom. Yes, my room is clean. Yes, don't pull this drawer out because you'll see." And he pulls it. There's pipe bombs there. And then he goes, and there's a thing that says explosives on it. And he's got the fuse cord wrapped around the bed. And I mean, his room was a bomb-making factory. And I think if people had seen that, they would have questioned the Harris role in this more. The basement tapes, which we've seen, we went over and saw, and they showed to Time magazine. They destroyed those because what they showed, if you would analyze them and watch them over and over again, it would have shown much more about Eric and Dylan, the failure of the Harrises, the failure of the Klebolds. This was filmed in their houses. The one where they have all the pipe bombs laid out on the row in Dylan's room, where they drag the shotgun over it, and Dylan's talking about how, gee, this thing makes me look fat when I wear it. He was worried about how he's going to look in his duster when he goes to kill people. It shows the confusion of their immature teenage minds and the bravado they had and the anger they had, but it showed they had already built the pipe bombs and they had the shotgun and the weapons, and this is just before they're going to do this, and they're up in his room, and the Klebolds are one floor below and never even go check on him, and the Harrises never search Eric's room. They would have found all of this stuff, and the Harrises never smelled the gunpowder on Eric from going to shooting weapons and building pipe bombs, and never noticed that in the smell of the napalm he manufactured in the garage. Really? Go to your house and open up the gas can for 5 minutes and put it in the garage and close it. Everyone when they come home is going to go, "What's the gas smell?" So, but if people can analyze the basement tapes, which I'm sure there's still copies, but they're not going to ever release, we could learn again so much more about this violentisation process and what they were going through and what their thoughts were at the time. But I think some of it was, I honestly think there are references in there to the police investigating them, that like when Walsh went up to their house over when we reported that Eric shot a window in our house up with a paintball gun.
Right.
And we reported that. We had no evidence. We followed the paintball down the street. Houses down the street had paintball markers on them. He just happened to hit our window. There was a hole in the window that big. And the red paint was all over the garage in tiny little weird little droplets. It was bizarre.
Right.
So we followed those paint, and we followed him up the street to Eric's house. It was like, you've got to be kidding. So we reported him to the police. We never heard back, but they did investigate that. So that means the police went there for that too.
Right.
And that deputy talked to them. And what are the results of all that? And on and on. Those are the things that we need to know.
Right.
But we don't need to know them anymore for the investigation. We know there were cover-ups. The Attorney General Salazar with the incredible courage he showed as an elected official, one of the few, actually, maybe one of the only, he and Ted Mink showed some courage in this. Every other politician in the state was a complete coward and did the cover-up with everyone else, including Governor Owens. What a disappointment. He backstabbed Erickson by not giving him subpoena power. And I respect Justice Erickson a great deal. Difficult to work with.
Sure.
Oh my gosh.
Sure.
It's the first time I've ever worked with a Supreme Court judge, and he told you what he wanted, and that was the way it is. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating perspective.
Right. He chaired the commission.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Governor's Commission, Erickson ran that. But he wasn't given subpoena power. So when Stone said, drop dead, what could he do? Couldn't do anything.
Right.
But it doesn't, it matters what we could learn from them, not who to incriminate.
Right.
The statute of limitations, no one's going to get, it's murder, I don't know, maybe. Can you still be found to be an accomplice to murder after 20 years? I don't know. But that doesn't matter now.
Right.
It's what we could learn from the behavior of these kids, the unbelievable juvenile behavior. They were such, they talk about teenage minds not being developed. Oh my gosh. You talk about two immature, stupid teenagers that had these ideas but it's not what people think. With Eric, it's not, I'm a Nazi, I'm going to go kill people like the Nazis, and that was bull. That wasn't him at all. Even in his writings, he wrote about Germany and stuff, and I mean, there are pages and pages of reports, but he was no Nazi follower. That's misleading. That's propaganda. That's not true.
Right.
That wasn't what made him what he became. And believe me, I have studied this. Oh my gosh, for 20 years.
Right.
I would go down in the basement and read a book and put it away and read it again and read the evidence pages and read them again and make notes and I remember a great deal. It's funny now. When I was sick, I wasn't very good with that. It was funny, but I don't have an eidetic memory, but I remember the details of certain things.
Sue talks about this a little bit, and I read other reports of the basement tapes, but I'm curious if you can remember, to what extent do you think they're posturing for the camera, but to what extent do you think there's sort of breaks from that to show who they really are? How much of it is real, and how much of it would be, in your mind, posturing?
Boy, that I would need to see them 5 more times to see that. But from what I remember and what I've read of them, because there are transcripts, abbreviated transcripts, it's not everything, but it's transcripts of some of it. But seeing them, that's a great question.
Right.
A lot of it is posturing. I honestly, when I saw that, we learned 2 things. We learned Dylan was not an innocent or forced participant, which I had hoped that he'd been coerced into doing this by Eric. Dylan, you did this or I'm going to kill your parents, which has happened to other school shooters, happened in the STEM shooting. The kid was threatened, or you do this with me or I'll kill your mother. Well, okay, I'm not excited about it, but what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Like making somebody rob a bank for you. It's kind of so I'd hoped that was the case. The basement tape showed me that Dylan was a willing participant.
Right.
And at the time we said this was the end of innocence. And it was not Dylan's innocence, it was the end of ours, that we could no longer think that Dylan was not a murderer.
Right.
It's hard for me to accept. The basement tape showed me that. So see, that's the first time I saw it. That's the first thing I got from it. Dylan was a willing participant. And see, then that's why every time you do something like this, you read it the 5th time and you go, oh my gosh, I just learned this the 5th time. It took me 5 times watching this to get this.
Right.
That's why I like to see them again and again. As you learn more, it's like, I didn't see that comment before. But so that's the first thing we learned. Dylan was a willing participant. The absurdity of the secrecy that they tried to have. Dylan spread the pipe bombs out in a row and wore his duster, and they had the weapons in his room while his parents are home with the door closed. Now, oh my gosh, if the parents had walked in, this is over.
Right.
Did they want that? Did they want the parents to walk in? Did the parents never walk in? What were the rules in the house? I mean, oh my gosh. It just raises so many questions.
Right. Sorry, if you can remember right on the tapes, like,
yes,
they're not necessarily like whispering to each other, right?
Oh no, they're talking and loud and now I do remember when they were in the one room with the couch while they were drinking, they were being quiet. That was kind of funny.
Right.
And because they're drinking, and I don't think they wanted to get caught with the alcohol. Mr. Harris was very upset when he caught Eric drinking.
Right.
And it's reported by a number of his friends and other places that Mr. Harris found the pipe bomb, didn't know what to do with it, stored it in his closet, and then detonated it with Eric in a field because he was afraid of putting it in the trash because it might kill somebody. But it was just fireworks. Oh, bull. That's the complicity of Mr. Harris, that his friends know. Eric told his friends that happened. We've talked to many people about this. Many people have said, I had explosives when I was a kid. We took fireworks and we made bombs when we made pipe bombs. It was fascinating how big an explosion we could get, and they're not killers. So I'm not sure. Would I have turned my son into the police for that? I probably would have. But I certainly would have grounded him for 6 months, and I would have searched his room every single day.
Right. But again, like, it's not just it's the totality of the circumstances with Mr. Harris and Eric, right?
There you go.
It's not just like, oh, hey, son, my great son, right? Oh, what's this, right? As opposed to knowing how much he did know, right? And how
And then when he knows that much, and he was in the military, Mr. Harris, and he gets a call from Green Mountain Guns. By the way, your clips are in. 11 clips? Why he knows what a clip is.
Right.
It's not a hair clip, for God's sake. It's a magazine for a rifle.
I'm calling from Green Mountain Guns.
Right.
Right.
And then to ignore that when he knows about the pipe bombs and he knows about Eric's behavior, and he knows, Mr. Harris knows, that Eric is on, I forget what the first drug was.
Zoloft.
Zoloft, and then Luvox,
right.
fluvoxamine, and SSRI. And he's on those, and his dosage is quadrupled from when he started.
Right.
From 50 to 200, that's 4. And he doesn't think of searching Eric's room and monitoring his son any better than that.
Right.
That's incompetence.
Right. And again, talk about the diversion files. Talk about what Eric puts down in terms of I have homicidal thoughts.
Suicidal and homicidal. He writes that down.
Right.
And that's at Dylan's house. And Dylan's parents were mostly home. He was mostly home. Now she worked, but he worked out of the house a lot.
Right.
So that's why they didn't build the pipe bombs and stuff there. But they built the pipe bombs and the napalm, which you have to manufacture. It's a mixture, napalm.
Right.
And all that stuff at Eric's house. How do you do that at your house and not notice that you're what's all this stuff doing here? What's that odor in the air?
Right.
They disassembled fireworks to take the black powder from it to make pipe bombs.
Right.
And manufactured the pipe bombs in Eric's house. At Eric's house. They didn't have a manufacturing place they went to.
Right.
This was Eric's house.
Right.
So
a few times in high school, my parents go on like a skiing vacation or something. I'd have a buddy come over and he'd pull out a joint and he'd smoke it in the house, and I would be so paranoid that my folks would find out. I'd air out the house for like a whole day.
Sure.
Or a girl would come over and after it just like, that's a far cry from making napalm in the garage or your kitchen. So
napalm, pipe bombs, propane tanks.
Right.
Assembling the stuff to do that. Now they did buy some of the propane tanks that day, but they had other ones. There were 8 total. They bought 3 that day, 4 that day. I forget exactly. It shows Eric was certainly motivated to have a father who was ex-military and somewhat difficult, autocratic. I think probably, in my opinion, verbally abusive.
And you talked about that right in your book when you watched the Hitman for Hire video.
Yes.
Where Eric's getting in the camera's face. It's like, you ever do this again? Like the drill sergeant kind of thing?
Yeah. When I watched that video the first time, where he goes, "You worthless little piece of shit," that cut right to my heart. It was like, wow, I've heard that before. And then other people that watched it would on their own come up to me and go, he's mirroring his dad. That's what his dad yells at him. They had heard the same thing from their parents too.
Right.
So Absolutely. That's
Right.
what I see it as.
Rewind the clock to April 19th, 1999, the day before, right, the tragedy. At that point, right, you could say Eric was dangerous, right? In your estimation, Eric Harris was dangerous?
Oh my gosh, yes. We had, for at least a year, and I don't want people to think we cowered in our house in fear. We knew Eric was dangerous. We didn't know what he was going to do, and we were cautious.
Right.
He did set off fireworks on our front, right on that front sidewalk there, right by the door. He shot a window out in the house. They had burned bushes at a friend's house. He broke Brooks's windshield, and he did other missions. We knew Eric was dangerous. There was one day, I'll never forget this. Aaron was sitting on the front yard. See, stuff like this gets me. With a bat, waiting for them to come back, because he was going to take a bat to their car. And so I had to sit out with Aaron on the front yard because that's how afraid Aaron was of them.
Right.
But so we went to the police. We didn't go to the parents. You go to the parents and they're going to go, oh, we can work this out. He's a good kid. Okay, let's do that. We went to the police.
Right.
We went to the police a lot. We took it to the police. We went over there and to review the file with the detective, and he lost the file. They couldn't find it. So we came back, printed it up again, and met him again 4 days later with the file again and complained to the detective. Well, he had found Eric's file then. And he came into the room and he left Eric's file on the desk. There it is, the envelope with it in there. As I remember, it was a manila folder. I don't remember the color. But the file's there. It's yay thick. And he leaves the room. And I now look at that as he wanted us to look at this file, and we didn't do it because we thought that would have been wrong to open Eric's file. It's confidential. He's a juvenile. So we didn't open the file. And yeah, that's a moment in time I would go back and I would redo. I said, he left the file here. And Judy went, don't go in the file. So we didn't look in the file. And now I would open the file and go, well, what the hell? Look at all the things he's done.
Right.
We didn't know about the van break-in.
Right.
So we thought when they got in trouble at school, they were called out of class. They were in trouble by the police. When they got in trouble at school, we thought it was our report. So we thought, okay, they did something about this. Now we better stay low because we don't want Eric knowing it's us. Judy was always afraid Eric would kill Brooks. Judy saw, after all the things we did, Judy saw after Jonesboro happened in Jonesboro,
right.
Arkansas, right? And the killing there, Judy saw Eric buying a gun magazine at King Soopers, and it freaked her out because that was the first time we knew that he was interested in guns. We knew that he'd been running missions and detonating pipe bombs, but we weren't as concerned about that. Guns are different.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it was a rifle magazine. And so she even called the detective on that and said, look, he's interested in guns now. Jonesboro could happen here, or is going to happen here. You need to get this kid. And when we left the detective that one time, he said, I've got this kid. Don't worry about it. He just said, look, your report and this and what, he's in diversion already.
Right.
They don't even need a search warrant. They can just go, he's in diversion. He's on probation. They can just go to his house and search his room. They had that right. The detective said, I've got this kid. And that's Detective Hicks. And he was stopped by somebody. Now, was that Kickbush or was that Dave Thomas? Or was that the judge? Or was it the theory I have in my book that I actually think is so obvious now? I don't know how I missed it for 20 years.
Right.
That it was because it was a plea bargain agreement between all the parents and the district attorney and the judge.
Like that question already been settled prior to your meeting. He was like, oh no, we got it. Don't worry about it.
And that's why our file was closed the day we went to meet the detective.
Right.
How do they close our file when we go to meet the detective? Well, we didn't know that.
Right.
We didn't find that out for 2 years that our file was. How could they close it the day? What?
Right.
And so we knew Eric was dangerous.
Did you think Eric could commit mass murder?
Actually, we thought Eric would kill Brooks, is what we thought would happen.
Right.
And Judy had, Gavin de Becker talks about it in his book, The Gift of Fear, and that women, and it's odd, have a sense of danger that they listen to that men tend to ignore.
Yeah.
I don't know that he says that precisely in his book, but that's what I got from it. What great books they are, The Gift of Fear, and Protecting the Gift is the other book. So Judy had this fear of him. She was so afraid of it that she took his license number and description, wrote it down, and gave it to every single neighbor we had, and said, if you see this kid, if you see this car, you need to let me know this kid is dangerous. She went to the neighbors and told them that. When Columbine happened, the neighbor across the street brought that note over and said, this kid, and it was the sticky note Judy had given her. And yes, that was Eric Harris. So
right.
Judy knew that from the beginning. I didn't believe it as much. I thought it was more harassment and problems, and this kid's a jerk, and
right.
And Brooks seemed to be handling it okay. Brooks was never violent, and all. He was so involved in debate and theater, and he just loved the theater and acting, and worked with Dylan in the play.
Right.
And Dylan ran the lights for the play, so he knew him from there too. And Dylan was great at that stuff.
Right.
And helpful and nice. Dylan even helped Rachel with a problem in the play.
The audio, right? Her mic wasn't on.
And she fixed that. But that was his job. But he was so helpful and nice. He was
right.
Even then.
Right.
Isn't Dylan a confusing thing?
Eric's one thing on April 19th.
But we knew Eric was a danger. When this happened, Brooks called me on my cell phone, and he said, Dad, there's been a shooting at the school. Well, I didn't know what he meant. Like 2 shots, a shooting.
Sure.
So I went, is it Eric? Immediately, that was obvious. And he said, Dad, I don't know. I said, is it Eric? And I might have said, is it Eric and Dylan? I don't remember exactly now. It's been so long. And he said, Dad, I don't know. And Brooks that's a long story. Brooks is leaving the school and saw Eric in the parking lot. Eric didn't kill him. And then Brooks went out to the street to have a cigarette because you had to be off school property. And he said,
unless you had permission for Mr. D to get in the smokers pit?
Well, no, he needed our permission to smoke in the smokers pit.
Oh, okay.
We wouldn't give him permission to smoke. So he had to, instead of being in the smokers pit, so they could smoke illegally on school grounds, we wouldn't agree to that because we didn't want him smoking. So he would go out and stand on Pierce.
Right.
And that's the public sidewalk, and they couldn't stop him there. So he would go, and he smoked. So that's where Eric didn't shoot him when he was on his way to do that.
Right.
But yeah, we knew it was Eric. Did we think it was Dylan? We didn't know it was Dylan. We were hoping it wasn't Dylan, but then they announced on TV that it was them.
Right.
They gave both names, and Judy's oddly enough the one that told Tom and Sue that. Judy was down at Tom and Sue's house to help them, and she told them that it was Dylan too.
Right.
And they were just quiet and confused and trying to accept it. And
right.
What a mess it was for them.
I'm trying to avoid the rabbit hole, but I got so many questions that it's sort of like I'm lurking on the side.
Isn't it a rabbit hole? Because you can take one thing, and with what I know and what we've studied, and you can just go round and around and around
right.
on one detail, to where it just becomes almost a nightmare. Oh, and just imagine if you had, the ballistics information and studied the ballistics, which I did for months.
Right.
And the maps of the ballistics and the maps in the library and all the information. You could just study this for 15 years. Kickbush standing in the records room at Jefferson County, and there are black notebooks behind him with the white label, with a white label thing to fit in, the black giant notebooks. There are 300, they're this thick, 500 pages each minimum, and they have 300 volumes of those. And he says that in this interview, and there's a picture of that jerk standing there. Well, he might have been leaning on a table, as I remember. everything leads somewhere else in the investigation.
Right.
That when you look at the pictures of the library, the evidence pictures, and ignoring all the dead bodies and all that, and you just go to the north part of the library, which is the entrance to the library from outside,
Right.
on the north side. There's a hallway there with some rooms, odd-shaped rooms. There are blue. I have a picture with blue or yellow lines coming in, and that's all police rounds fired into the school by the police after Eric and Dylan were dead. And those bullets ended up in monitors and in walls and in books and in the library and in the ceiling, and they're fired. One policeman used his .45 to do that. You get firing into the school blindly, and the police did that. Yes, Eric and Dylan killed people with bullets, but afterwards the police came in and did this.
Right.
The police response to this is very important.
Right.
They came up to the back door of the school, and O'Shea and others fired into the back door of the school. The bullets traveled the entire length of the school because the fire doors had not closed, and buried themselves in the inside of the front door. And I've walked that hallway many times. We filmed it. Judy and I walked over once with a camera and filmed it during a debate meeting. And they fired into the ceiling and into lockers and into columns. And bullets ricocheted off the wall and ended up in the hallway. The police did that.
Right.
When O'Shea went downstairs, and this was, I think was this before, I'd have to look up the times, but he fired blindly into the teacher's lounge through a window, not seeing what was there. Fired his semi-automatic rifle, set on automatic. According to the policeman on the scene, I'm not making that up, they said he fired on automatic setting. I actually have seen the video. I shouldn't say that. One of the news stations allowed me into their editing room and let me watch the videotapes they had. And I watched O'Shea fire at a wall of the school with his rifle on automatic. You can see it. He fires like this, in a big semicircle into the wall of the school. Now, that's a policeman out of control. But all that's unbelievable why he would do that. But here's the wall, and he fires into the wall. There's a policeman standing right here. He fired 6 feet left of that policeman with his, I forget what he had, but AR-15, AR-223, I can't remember. Fully automatic setting. Now, that's out of control.
Absolutely.
That's an unbelievably ridiculous response to a school shooting. And people need to know that.
Right.
People need to understand this. This isn't fun, but this is like, what can you learn from these things? You can learn you can't do that. Well, if O'Shea, a trained SWAT member, can be that out of control, and so can others, O'Neill and others, firing into the school, Monahan, firing into the school blindly, Gardner firing into the front door of the school and the library with a .45 from that far away, that's just unbelievable.
Right. You
just shouldn't do that.
Right.
That's what you learn from these things. That's why you release everything, so people can learn.
Right.
Because what good, the next school shooting, the same thing will happen, and people go, well, they shot 3 kids, but it's just what happened. No, and this is why you don't arm teachers.
Right.
SWAT members can't do it. Trained deputies can't do it. An Army vet at the STEM school can't do it.
Right.
Some teacher, Bob, I call him Bob the biology teacher in my book. He's going to have the presence of mind to only shoot the shooter. Was there collateral damage at Columbine? I actually believe there was. And honestly, it's something I simply cannot do. I cannot make myself do that research.
Right.
I can't. I've done enough research. There's some things that I've learned and listened to from things that people have given us that are so sad that I wish I didn't know, and I don't want to know that now. There's things that I wish I hadn't seen. I've seen the pictures of the children in the library murdered. I've listened to tapes of them being murdered. I've read the ballistics and stuff, and I've seen the autopsies, and those are things I really wish I didn't know. I wish I'd never had them.
Right.
To be honest.
And I think in a lot of ways, right, like it's hard for people to wrap their heads around, right, kind of the long-term victims of this, as opposed to the 13 and
long-term victims, like all the kids in the room that are trapped in the room for 3 or 4 or 5 hours or 7 hours or 6 hours. And the police come to the door and they're dressed all in black. There's nothing on the front of the uniform that says SWAT. And they put their weapons in their face and the lasers are hitting the kids. And they're going, put your fucking hands up.
Yeah.
We heard many kids tell us that story. They couldn't, that's how you treat victims in a school?
Right.
Could people learn from that too? Yeah. Have you ever heard that story? You don't hear that story about the police response, do you?
No.
We've heard that dozens of times. That they didn't learn from this. They say they changed the response things. Sure, they don't stand up that side of the school and just let children be killed now. Now the first responders are supposed to go in, and the first responders have a responsibility. They go in and they're supposed to neutralize the shooter first.
Right.
If that's really the reason they didn't go into Columbine, we think there are other reasons.
Right.
Because the FBI, and it's in the FBI report, that because of the diversion bombs, everyone was afraid that there were diversion bombs in the school. Every backpack to them was a diversion bomb. And so that alerted the diversion bombs used here in the park, such as 2 blocks over here.
Right.
Alerted the police and the bomb squad guys that backpacks could be bombed.
Sure.
So, and there were backpacks everywhere. So don't go into the school. There are bombs, maybe bombs everywhere.
Yeah, but there's also kids in the school at the time, right?
Yeah.
And so.
Now they kept the police out anyway.
Right.
I think you could learn from that.
Absolutely. And let's talk about Columbine itself in the late 90s. Let's talk about, your 2 sons, Brooks and Aaron, were students at that time. Can you tell the listeners for a second what it meant to be a jock? And then more importantly, right, what it meant to kind of be on the other side of that question, right, to not be a jock at Columbine in the late 90s. Maybe speak to like the culture at the time that your sons and Eric and Dylan and every student, right, at that school kind of had to experience.
Well, anything I say, people are going to dismiss. I say,
sure.
Look, it was a school that allowed the bullying. The principal was invisible. He never did his job. I believe that without question. I know that because I filed complaints and made complaints and they disappeared. And from FERPA regulations, they never are released and files are confidential. HIPAA or FERPA, which one was it?
I think it's FERPA.
FERPA, yeah, I thought it was FERPA. The stupid regulations that keep files confidential.
Right.
We know for a fact that people like Isaiah's aunt, Betty, went and complained about him being called the N-word and him being treated and made fun of and treated badly, and it went nowhere, and she was frustrated. We know other people that had did this and went to the school and complained.
Right.
That's such an important element of this.
Yeah.
Because there are bullies everywhere. It's so easy to be a bully. You need to be stopped from being a bully and humiliating other children. If you're not stopped, your bullying escalates.
Right.
When you're bullying, and let's say I'm the bully, and I knock you down in the school and call you you little shit, you talk to my girlfriend again, I'm going to kick your ass, and I scare the shit out of you, and no one intervenes, that's once.
Right.
So the next time I see you in the hall and I knock you down again, or I give you an elbow that you cannot believe the force behind, and I'm big, I can do that. I've never bullied anyone in my life that I can remember, but I could do that. I could be a jerk and be a bully. And the second time, now that's twice, now you're afraid, but now something different happens. Now the third time I see you in the hall, I look at you and you're afraid of me. And that's the beginning of hypervigilance. Now you're afraid of me. I don't even need to bully you. I need to look at you.
Right.
Or I need to walk down the hall. Don't frickin' walk down my hall, you little bastard. Don't.
Right.
You will stay out of that hallway. Now you're afraid of me. Now you're hypervigilance. You begin the process of hypervigilance with Paul Moons. What an amazing person. I've met Paul Moons a couple times, and what a great guy, what a person. He wrote the book When a Child Kills, and it's a sad, unbelievable book about children who kill their parents because of hypervigilance. They become so afraid that when their parent comes home from school, they kill their parent to protect themselves. That's how afraid they are. Well, that's what hypervigilance is. And now I'm hypervigilant and I'm in this school. Everything I see, the parade for the football players, the jocks parking their car wherever they want, people getting out of their way in the hallways, the girl I can't talk to because he'll punch me in the shoulder, supports my injustice, my sense of injustice to this humiliation that the hypervigilance accentuates and accentuates. And that's a quick version of what Paul Mones teaches in his book.
When you have a place like Columbine in the late 90s, right, and you are hypervigilant, it almost gets reinforced every single day.
Oh, every day, multiple times. You're standing out on the street, this happened to my son, with, I believe it was with Eric and Dylan and someone else standing there, and as the jocks drive by, they throw a bottle at you from a moving car. Now it hits in the ground and it breaks at your feet. And Brooks is upset, and they go, happens all the time. And when the jocks, some of them, not all football players are jocks, but when they're driving around looking for kids to beat up, this is a fact now. This is an absolute personal story told to me by an irrefutable source. Looking around to beat people up, and they see you, and they are going to beat you up, and they're harassing you until they see that one of the football players is in your car. And then they go, oh, never mind. That's the fear that these kids live with. They can't drive down the street without being afraid. They're harassed. And humiliation, continued humiliation, creates anger and violence. Now that's another book that is absolutely amazing. It's called Violence by Gilligan. Just an amazing book to read, so full of information. But actually, it's, I don't want to say it's one-dimensional, that's unfair. It teaches that lesson, that humiliation creates anger and violence. And that's why that book is so valuable. It doesn't go into the other things as much, but it does. Humiliation creates anger, creates violence. In return, creates revenge. And you can see that. That's every archetypal movie we have in our society. Oh, they killed my family, I'm going to get them.
Death Wish.
Death Wish. Death Wish might have been the first. Well, other than the old Westerns, but the Westerns were, but yes, Death Wish might have been the first movie about that. And now it's everything.
It seems like, again, the culture has come to a point, at least from your perspective, to a point where all these things are exacerbated, Violence is now like everywhere.
Yes.
The video games.
You are so smart, and you are so perceptive. Thank you, because absolutely that is true. Oh, and violence again, and this is, Lonnie Athens doesn't address this, but violence needs an instructor to create the levels of violentization. You need almost a mentor. Here's what you should do, man. And that's what the video games, he doesn't say that because it's 20 years before, 10 years before they were ever out. But that's what this is. It's part of the violentization process. The video games allow the killing. They almost encourage the killing.
And it's like, you see this right here, like a cell phone?
Yes.
How many kids have cell phones,
Yes.
Like Eric and Dylan had to they had to drive to go see Reservoir Dogs. They had to go drive to see Natural Born Killers, All of a sudden, I'm a 13-year-old, 14-year-old pissed off kid who's being bullied every day, All of a sudden, I got one of these.
Yes.
Instant violence, instant whatever.
That's the ending of my video on YouTube is, why does it surprise you that the children that become violent in our society, in our violent society, kill our innocent children? That's the society we've created. We're a society of unbelievable violence, and no one wants to face that. And the wars we're in, that violence is below the surface. We don't face it. We're spending half of the money we ever make in this country fighting wars overseas and developing the war machine to kill people. We're a violent society. No one wants to face that. No one. When was the last time Martin Luther King or Gandhi's words were ever espoused by someone running for president? You can't do that because our society is based so much on the war machine that to stop it would probably cause serious economic problems. Who's going to spend $20 million in these missiles we're manufacturing? That's so much of our economy. No one wants to face that. And no one wants to face the violent society we've created and live in, because it doesn't affect me. I'm living here. I'm in suburbia, and well, other than Eric and Dylan killing people, and other than the murders with all the guns and the killings at the subway and the murders at the bowling alley and the lady that was killed 2 streets over because a kid kidnapped her and killed her with a weapon, it doesn't affect me. Psychologists, psychiatrists have all these complicated reasons. I hate to bring up Peter Langman, but he denies that bullying is the reason, and humiliation, and people buy that. But all the other methods they're using to stop school shootings are really not working very well.
Right.
Now, yes, Safe to Tell works. The call-in hotline, where you can call in a school shooter, is effective because people that start showing red flag behavior, that's the kids that are beginning the process of violentization.
Right.
They actually go to them and stop them. And so that's a roadblock that stops them, that stops that development, hopefully. And that's an effective method. But metal detectors, you got to be kidding. Arming teachers, having policemen go in first, that's all after the fact. Kids are already dead by the time a policeman can get there. Kids are already dead by the time a teacher can get his pistol and go defend them.
Right.
You need to stop the shooters before they get to the school.
Right.
How do you stop a shooter before he gets to the school? You take away his anger. These kids, Eric and Dylan, were angry. They were hypervigilant.
Right.
They were in the process of violentization. So how do you stop them? You stop the humiliation.
Right.
And if this kid that we're talking about that I'm knocking to the ground, if one teacher had said, "What is going on here? You, the bully, you come with me. You don't need to come with me. You were pushed to the ground. You come with me. You're expelled."
Right.
And if I hear that you bully this kid again, you're out of the school, and I'm going to call the police.
Absolutely.
I'm going to charge you with assault, because it's assault and battery. You do that again. If that bullied kid saw that, he wouldn't be afraid anymore.
Right.
That's what needed to happen. And that's what never happened at Columbine.
Right.
Never. Not one teacher intervened. The principal didn't intervene. The school resource officer didn't stop it. The bullying continued unremittingly, and that's what caused this. That hypervigilance that he developed was never stopped.
Right.
And there's actually a page in this book. I'd have to find it. Moreover, if a person enters but does not complete the brutalization stage, he will not become a dangerous, violent criminal. If you interrupt the process, even for criminals, you can stop them from being criminals. If you interrupt the bullying and the hypervigilance, you can stop the development of that child into a killer.
Right.
And that's what needs to happen.
Absolutely.
But you don't hear that.
Right.
That's the lesson. And what? This little book is so important, by Lonnie Athens. Richard Rhodes, the incredible genius who wrote The Making of the Atomic Bomb, and he won the Pulitzer Prize. Richard Rhodes, what an incredible genius author. He wrote a book about this book. What an honor to Lonnie Athens. It's called Why They Kill. And it talks about Lonnie Athens and what he learned. That is the highest compliment that genius writer Richard Rhodes could ever pay to Lonnie Athens. And people don't even get that. That book is not a bestseller or anything. That is an amazing thing. That's how much Richard Rhodes believes in this concept. He wrote an entire book that's this thick about this little book.
Right.
That's amazing. And that should tell people, wait, there's a lesson here we're missing. That's the lesson. Dylan, that little innocent boy, can be turned into someone who will do this. That process can happen to anyone.
Right.
Stop that process.
Going back to Brooks's quote, right, where it's like they had no reason not to, Dad.
That's an epistemological reason. That's a philosophical reason. That's theory.
Right. But you flip that for a second, right? You sort of almost stop this process, right? Stop the humiliation.
Right.
You sort of, it's almost like you're giving them a reason not to.
Yes.
Right. You reverse that whole thing Brooks said and said, hey, look, there's someone out there who'll stand up for me, right? You break them out of that mindset for just a second, and they can sort of like decompress.
Oh, now see, that's interesting. I took that a different way, his comment. I thought it meant they had no philosophical background not to kill, because they weren't religious. They hadn't been taught that.
Sure.
So, thou shalt not kill wasn't part of their vocabulary. They didn't, they had been. But your point is just as valid. I didn't think of it that way.
Right.
That yes, nothing had stopped them from doing this, so there was
Right.
nothing to demotivate them.
Right.
Yes.
Again, like it's, I
Oh
think.
my God. Very smart. But how do you stop the process? You don't arrest him and put him in diversion and make him report and pay fines, $1,000 in fines, and make him attend. That doesn't help the bullying. That doesn't stop the cause. The cause is the humiliation and the hypervigilance.
Right.
Getting arrested then, when you start your violentization process and you start acting up, just confirms it.
Right.
Now wait, this bully's beating the shit out of me, and yet I'm the one who gets arrested, and I get in trouble for
Right.
running a stop sign. Dylan got arrested for. You got to be kidding me.
Right.
I get a ticket for that when I'm being beat up.
It's like they're not protecting me.
No, they did not.
No one protects me. No teacher protects me. No coach protects me.
Bingo.
Right. No policeman protects me.
And so what do you end up hating when you're done? You end up hating the entire school so much you want to kill the school.
Right.
I know that sounds weird, but that was their motive, was to kill that school.
Right.
They're blowing up the school. They didn't go to the gas station.
Right.
They didn't go to the police station.
Right.
They didn't go to the football game. They tried to kill that school.
Right.
That was their motivation.
The school is a symbolic bully, right? Or the school is a symbolic thing they want to destroy. That's like, that's the heart of this whole tragedy.
Yes.
In so many ways.
Yes.
Like that's the plan. That's the
Oh,
whole
I
thing.
can never say that to someone initially, because they don't get that.
Right.
That's like when people said, "Why did they do this in meeting?" And I would go, "Why do prisoners riot?"
Right.
People wouldn't get that. It's like, what's he talking about? When you're a prisoner, you're in prison for a crime, but you're still unhappy that you're receiving unjust treatment and crappy food, and you're getting beat up and accosted in the hallways. That's why people riot. They still have rights and a sense of justice for themselves. That's why prisoners riot.
Right.
Why did they do this? Why do prisoners riot? It's the same thing.
Right.
They fought back against this unfair situation. Perceived injustice or injustice.
Right.
Is there a difference to the person that's being bullied and humiliated? There isn't.
Right. Right. And again, back to the prison analogy, right? If you're getting your ass kicked every day and the guard just walks by,
Right.
doesn't say a thing or doesn't look
Do you
at
hate the guard? Oh my gosh, yes, after
absolutely,
a
yeah.
while. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Like you're looking at them like, dude, hey, you're the guy, right? That's your job.
Why aren't you protecting me? Tell me that they didn't think that in the school when the teachers walk by and the teachers don't do anything, when these bullies get away with it. When the bully even gets caught, he gets arrested, and he still plays in the next game.
Right. You walk in, there's the guys who are kicking your ass. There's the guys because you can't get girls, right?
At the time, I don't know exactly what it's like now. I haven't been in the school
Right.
for a number of years. At the time, Columbine was a shrine to the athletes.
Right.
Their pictures were enlarged pictures all over the wall, some in uniform, some not. The hanging display case was all the trophies, football trophies. Frank DeAngelis in his office had a giant picture of the football team behind him, football trophies, football things on the wall. Football was king. Football mattered.
Right.
Now, did they understand what they were doing? No, they were just
Right.
stupid. He's a stupid principal, being an ignorant principal, not understanding. It's a school for academics. It's not a football camp.
Right.
And not understanding that these big bully football players, the ones that were bullies, were creating an environment that he didn't even see.
Right.
And that he ignored from all the complaints. He didn't understand it. He didn't understand the humiliation, how that creates violence and
Right.
anger, how it creates a need for revenge, how it creates hypervigilance. It makes these children much more sensitive to the bullying, and it exaggerates it for them, and maybe makes it so real to them that they have to get revenge.
Right.
And so, and people go, well, the bullying wasn't that bad. There was bullying. There was humiliation. Now it's online. Children commit suicide because they get bullied online. Online.
Right.
And children commit suicide from that. Kids commit suicide in schools because of bullying and humiliation. It exists.
Right.
This is the reason for school shooters. That you need to stop the humiliation. In my book, I wrote the same chapter 3 times.
Right.
You remember it. It's How to Stop School Shootings.
Yep.
And it's the long version, and then the medium version. And oh my gosh, for months, that's still too complicated. I had to shorten it to make it so simple
Right.
that you couldn't miss the message.
Right.
And the message is this. Take away their anger, and they'll have no reason to go to school with a gun.
Right.
Defend them, and they're not going to hate the school. They're going to hate that bully maybe, but But they're not going to go shoot up the school and kill innocent children. They might hate that bully. They can't do anything against the bully. He's physically superior. He's got 5 friends that are physically superior.
Right.
You're going to just resent him the rest of your life. But you're not going to hate the school and find the school is the problem.
Sure.
If someone sticks up for you.
Right.
Take away their anger, and they have no reason to go to the school with a weapon.
Right.
How simple is that?
Right.
And why is that so hard for people to get?
And again, it makes sense, right? And when Eric writes about this in his writings, right, where he says, I finally felt powerful the first time when he first got the gun.
Yes.
And again, we talked about this at one point earlier, but the gun in a lot of ways becomes the equalizer, the ultimate equalizer.
Oh my gosh.
When you're 5'7", 120.
How do you become the biggest bully? You get a weapon.
Right.
Now you're the biggest bully. Now the little kid at the STEM school who is a tiny little kid, the weapon makes them the bully.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
You're the bully then. You're equal to the policeman with a gun. I mean, that's, the weapon is the great equalizer.
Right. And again, I think these are in the transcripts of like the basement tapes. People saw them, right? But I think at one point, I can't remember, Eric or Dylan, but at one point, I think Eric says, like, isn't it fun to finally be able to get the respect we deserve, right? And again, all these things just get twisted in so many ways. But again, these things all speak to what you're saying in terms of that's the reason and that's how to stop it.
Oh, and let me tell you, I've read everything and studied everything, and that's one reason. Then when I read one of these books, I went, what in the world, that fits this exactly?
Right.
Now, Paul None's book doesn't fit it exactly because that's children who are humiliated and bullied to the point where they're afraid for their lives, kill their parents. But it's the same humiliation, physical abuse creates fear, creates retaliation concept.
Right.
And so that was just a simple transposition to, well, the abuse of school is the parent. The more I read, and the more I read their writings and who they were and the process they went through, it fit this concept exactly. And it's you take this book and it's like you read through it and look, they're just pages highlighted of that's what they went through. That's what they went through. It's unbelievable. The comparisons, the clear following of the things that he teaches.
Right.
And that's where this message comes from. I mean, I had these ideas too, but these confirmed it to me.
Right.
Okay, this is valid.
Right.
This is the lesson. Is this is how you stop school shootings.
Right.
And admittedly they're rare, but training kids to throw cans and to throw rocks and teaching fear to our children is ridiculous. You don't need to do that. Stop the humiliation in the school.
Right.
Stand up for the bullied child so that he doesn't become hypervigilant and he's not angry and there won't be school shootings.
Do you want to talk about the ketchup incident?
Well, there are corroborating versions of this. We've heard it from a number of different sources. It wasn't like someone told us maybe this happened. There was someone told us this happened, I saw it. This happened, I saw it. There were different versions of it.
Right.
One was squirting ketchup packets. Another was throwing ketchup-soaked tampons. Another was just tossing ketchup at him. But the thing that confirms it is Sue saw Dylan when he got home with the ketchup on his clothes. And if you want to talk about humiliation, then squirt ketchup on a kid where his clothes are stained all day in a school, and he has to walk around like that all day.
Right.
And Dylan, of course, wouldn't talk about it. You don't tell your mother you've been emasculated at school. You don't tell your dad that.
Right.
Because your mother's going to wonder what your problem is, and your dad's going to make fun of you. Or something.
Right.
So you live with it. You internalize it.
Let's talk a little bit about the Regina Herder report.
Yeah, to understand the Regina Herder report, you have to understand when it was done.
Right.
This is when they're doing the governor's commission on Columbine. They're trying to find out what happened. And Governor Ritter was governor after that, or District Attorney Ritter, whatever. Had the courage to decide that he was going to find out if there was bullying, because it had been talked about and denied. Denied by the school, denied by Frank, denied by everyone. No, that's not the cause. He decided to investigate. So he assigned Regina Herder and one of her investigators to go talk to people. Well, no one would talk to them, but she came to us, and we, Judy, essentially, arranged people to come in and talk to her. And this is when no one would say there was bullying. It was being denied. The school denied it. But the kids came in and they told her stories that were just unbelievable. And she had the courage, talk about courage, Regina Herder, had the courage at the time to release a report that when you read it, it's not as condemning as I would have liked it to be, but because she tried to remain objective, but it still says there was bullying. Yes, that's a cause. And I don't know how you can dismiss that based on when it was done, right after Columbine, when they're doing the Governor's Commission, and they're doing this in-depth thing when no one would talk about it. These people that were bullied came forward. But we heard it from other people too. Isaiah's aunt, Betty, told us about the bullying and the problems, and other children talked to us about it.
Right.
So we had heard about it because we had already spoken up and saying that bullying was the cause, and there was bullying at the school, and it was the jocks and the bully football players. Not the football players, it was the jocks and the bully football players. Just like when you criticize police, it isn't all police, it's the bad policemen. Most policemen are really good people. Most football players are fine. They're bad policemen and they're bad football players.
Right.
That's like everything.
Right.
So,
Mr. Greenson.
he told the story about the bully in the school bouncing a basketball off his son's head, saying there's another one in the oven because his son was Jewish, and he would continue doing that. That's assault and battery and
Hate crime.
and a hate crime and crime against the Jewish people, and nothing was done. He complained about it. He couldn't get anything done. He complained directly to Frank, and he testified that, and he couldn't get anything done about it. But that's the tip of the iceberg. It was everywhere. It was endemic.
Right. And so I think we're definitely going to get into this a little bit later, but we've already talked about this a little bit, but can you speak to the impact of, when you're a bullied kid, right, and you see teachers, administration officials, coaches doing basically nothing, right? Whether you're getting bullied or, someone else is getting bullied in the hallway, what does that do to the mind of the bullied kid, and what does that do to the mind of the bully, right?
Oh, it does two things at once. The bully can get away with it, so his behaviors escalate. He can be a bigger bully. He can do whatever he wants. There are no constraints on him. But that's to the bully. To the bullied kid now, no one is defending him. He is hopeless. He is depressed. He is isolated. He has no defense. There's no redress. And the greatest injustice of all is when you can have no redress, when you have no hope for protection, no hope for justice. So you have this perceived or real injustice, whichever it is. I think it's a real injustice, and you can't ever do anything about it. You can't fight the bully. He has friends. They will beat the hell out of you.
Right.
And they do. They were physical. There were rumors that one bully had a bat with nails in it. I mean, you're going to fight a kid with a bat with nails in it. And then and I know this is jumping fast into how it works, but how do you fight a bully like that? You get a weapon. You want to fight a bully, you get a gun, you can fight a bully.
Right.
You can fight 5 bullies. So first, of course, it escalates. You get a gang. That's what the Trenchcoat Mafia is. That's the group that would fight the bullies, and they would have little altercations back and forth. But when you're isolated like Aaron Dillon and you're not part of the Trenchcoat Mafia, and some of the Trenchcoat Mafia guys were pretty big and tough. And the bullies, I don't think, wanted to fight them. They were maybe a little bit tough. But Eric and Dylan weren't tough. How did they fight back?
Right.
They fight back in little ways. This is the process of violentization. They start to fight back in little ways, and they slowly become more violent to get that perceived injustice.
Right.
But in violentization and in this process, there is a point where, and this is a very difficult thing for people to understand, these people that have been humiliated and bullied and tormented, they make a conscious decision that they're going to be violent in return. And conscious, unconscious, subconscious, conscious, I believe it is. It's a decision that I'm going to fight back and I'm going to do something. Athens talks about this in his book, that specific situation, that these people make an actual decision to be violent, to become violent, and to kill somebody or to fight back with a knife or to shoot somebody. And then that is a step in the violentization process. And it's not something we deal with. You and I aren't
Right.
We don't decide I'm going to become violent because this is going on. That's not part of our lives. But if you were humiliated enough, if you were the abused child, and your parents is abusing you, and he beats you and beats you and beats you every time he sees you. This is from Paul Moon's book, When a Child Kills.
Right.
At some point, some kids are going to wait in the garage with a rifle and kill their parents when they come home because they're just not going to have it anymore.
Right.
It's for them, or it's to protect their sibling, or it's just they're just afraid, and they're in their mind imminent danger, and they're protecting themselves, and that's hypervigilance. That's how it develops, and that is exactly the correlation to this. And it doesn't seem, these kids that have to be bullied so much for that to happen can't be bullying. It's bullying creates hypervigilance, and the hypervigilance creates the state where everything you see justifies the injustice that's being done to you, and everything you see proves it, and it proves it, and it proves it, and it proves it, until you're going to get revenge against this great injustice, and you're going to kill people to show them. You're going to do a bigger act of violence than they got to you. And it's in this book, and it's actually, the school shooters say this.
Right.
Eric and Dylan says, I'm going to do something, I'm going to get greater revenge than you did to me. That's in their actions, in the things they write.
Right.
And it's in here, it's in this book. And it fits so perfectly. But it's not, he bullied me, I decided to shoot him. That's not it at all.
Right.
They're living with what's going on. I'm being bullied, and then they're being bullied without any redress, without any chance of hope or justice. Then they get suicidal, they get depressed, they have a bad self-image, or they decide to fight back with violence. There are all kinds of reactions to it. You see it in the kids in school all the time.
Right.
No one wants to address this because it's just nothing you want to acknowledge, that these kids are tormenting these kids, and it's affecting these kids. Oh my gosh, I know people that hate the bully that bullied them in high school, and they're 60 years old. I've seen the one where the guy goes and he yells at the guy who bullied him in high school, and he's 60-some years old. He never can forget it. And then other people are bullied, and they can't even remember the name of the bully,
right,
or what happened, but they just remember there was a jerk in school. So it's how much you internalize it, of course, matters. But if you're hypervigilant and you're afraid for every day it's continual, then you can begin the process of violentization, where you decide to get revenge, and you make a conscious decision to get back at people.
Okay, at this point, let's now turn to exploring your thoughts, exactly why Columbine happened, right, in so many ways. In your book, you point to three interrelated concepts: humiliation, hypervigilance, and violentization.
Okay.
Right? So let's start with the first one. Let's start with humiliation.
Bullying is humiliation.
Right.
Bullying, if I want to bully you and I do it on the football field and I knock you down and no one sees it, I'm being a bully, I'm being a jerk. When I do it in front of your friends, I'm humiliating you.
Right.
Humiliation is an incredible motivator.
You often cite to James Gilligan's work, Violence, Our Deadly Epidemic, and Its Causes, right?
Yes.
What you learned about violence being a result of humiliation from Gilligan's work? Like, what did Gilligan teach you, I guess?
James Gilligan, in his book, Violence, and again, I don't want the book to sound one-dimensional, but it's very important to read because it teaches you that humiliation creates anger, and that can lead to violence and a violent reaction for revenge. And so I know that sounds almost too basic and too simple, but humiliation creates violence because I'm humiliating you.
Right.
If there's no justice and you have no hope, you're going to either leave, or it's going to change you for the worse, or you're going to get me.
Right.
Some people, and this is what a school shooter is the kid that's going to internalize it, and he's going to go, I'm worth more than this. You can't tell me I'm a piece of crap. You can't treat me like this. I'm going to get revenge. And that's what these kids are. This is the 1 in 100 kids, instead of being depressed and instead of internalizing it, or instead of ignoring it, which many people do.
Right.
Be a man and you'll be fine, he's a jerk, and just
right.
forget about it. They internalize it and they decide to get revenge.
Right.
So sure, that isn't every kid. That's why every kid's not a school shooter. But that's the cause.
Right.
And so they're humiliated, and that humiliation grinds on them. And then as they're continually humiliated, hypervigilance takes over, where they see everything that happens in the school. The kid has a big expensive car and he parks it in that space. Why does he get that space? Why does he have an expensive car?
Right.
So now the hatred grows and the humiliation grows and the hypervigilance creates a heightened state of awareness,
Right.
which is what hypervigilance is. So you're aware of everything that's going on, and when they have the school assembly for the football team, you internalize that. This guy's on the football team, or this guy's on that team, and he's a big jock, and you internalize that to hate the school and the pep rally. Now you hate the football team, so your anger grows and it starts to encompass more things, and that's why these kids go to kill the school. They shoot
Right.
up the school. They don't go and kill the bully. First, they're afraid of the bully. It's a very odd side of it. It would take more courage than they have to go fight the bully.
Right.
The bully is dangerous. And so, although in Paul Mone's book, these children do kill their parents.
Sure.
The father, who is the bully in
Right.
many cases. But so they go to the school. They don't go after the bully because they don't want to go in the weight room and try to take on the bully with a pistol. You'd be overwhelmed and you would lose and they'd kill you.
Right.
They're not doing that. No, they're going and they externalize it. Now they hate the school. They hate the school in
Right.
general, and they go to kill the school. It's the same as going postal. It's the same thing. You hate the situation so much. You hate the bureaucracy and the boss, and you can't get ahead, and this guy gets ahead because his sister works there, and so you hate that so much, you go and shoot up the post office and all the people that work there. That's how much your hatred grows.
Right.
So you direct it in that direction. It's the same concept. It's so obvious. They're going to kill the school. They're going to take away the thing that tormented them and punish all the people that put them through this.
Right.
Yes.
And more importantly, right, it's almost like, no one, when you're in that state of mind, right, my understanding is no one's a neutral party, right?
You either were a bully or you watched the bullying.
Right.
Now, your friends that were bullied,
Sure.
you let them go. Eric and Dylan did that.
Sure.
They let kids go that were bullied too, but they also killed completely innocent people.
Right.
And people that never did anything to them.
Right.
And then oddly, they let a couple of athletes go, who it's bizarre. Right.
And this is the first part of the chain, right? Humiliation, hypervigilance.
Yes. It's steps. So first, you have bullying, which is just bullying. Maybe not necessarily humiliation. It's
Right.
superior to you, but no one sees it, so it's that guy was a jerk to me.
Right.
But now, when I bully you in front of other people, especially girls, now I'm humiliating.
Right.
Now it's affecting your self-image and your ego, your superego, and it's really
Which isn't great to begin with in a lot of ways.
no. But when that becomes continuous and no one intervenes, now we have the creation of hypervigilance. Now you're so humiliated so long, everything that happens you see as that, and then these instances which might be separate and not even meaningful to other people have
Right.
built to you to where they're magnified to 100 times their value to you.
Right.
And so now you hate this situation.
Right.
I'll give you a perfect example. I'm not black, but imagine if you're black and driving through Cherry Hills and you get pulled over by the first policeman that sees you because you're black driving your Mercedes to Cherry Hills. That's like, wow, what's going on? Now the fourth time they pull you over, you go, what is going on here? I live here, I got a nice car, they're pulling me over. It's the same thing. That's hypervigilance. That's why people feel, and maybe they are discriminated against, but that's also why discrimination is so accentuated for people that live through that.
Right.
They're hypervigilant to that concept. Well, when you're bullied and bullied continually and no one steps in, that's where the hypervigilance takes over.
Right.
And then at some point, you feel you've been dealt so unjustly, you decide to get revenge.
Right. You describe almost sort of not two different, but a few different types of experiences that can create humiliation, right? One we talked about is the blatant physical abuse, right? That's clear in a way when you're bullied. That's just a demonstration of your weakness to everyone else who's watching, right?
Okay.
The girl's not seeing you. But then you often talk about this like sort of self-imposed one or a self-conscious one, and you talk about like gifted children in some ways, right? Where they understand their mistakes. They understand when they make a mistake in class so much more than other people, right? That
Yes, and not giving Eric and Dylan attributions of being gifted.
Sure.
Dylan was very smart. I don't know how smart Eric was. Dylan was pretty smart. But I think smart children, they're embarrassed, and I think they're embarrassed by mistakes they make. So they're humiliated by the bully, and then they say something stupid, and instead of having confidence and letting it go, they internalize, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. That was so stupid.
Right.
And they are hard on themselves too.
Right.
When they're bullied, their self-image is bad, then the mistakes they make that worse. So it's all just a continual flow. Yes, I agree.
Right.
So, but I do think smart children, I mean, you take a test and you're really smart and you can't get something, it drives you crazy. It's like, why don't I understand this compound method that they're using?
Right.
You can understand everything else without even trying. Now, this is work. It's like,
right.
Well, maybe I'm stupid. Where the guy who has to work at everything and gets to that point goes, well, I get this next step, and doesn't internalize that.
Right.
So yes, they're sensitive, more sensitive to it in a funny way. I don't know that sounds.
No, that makes sense, right? And also in terms of, like, if you're not a star athlete, if you're not the guy who's getting that, confidence from the football field, if you're not doing that kind of stuff, you might only have, right, that one test.
Right.
That might be your personality. That might be your whole thing, identity. And if you're that much more aware and that much more, I don't know, maybe intellectually sensitive to certain things, right?
Well, and certainly
it compounds.
Yes. And then this is where the schools fail us, but this is a totally different subject. Let's just take 5 kids. This kid's gifted in basketball. This kid's amazing in music. This kid is amazing in math. This kid theorizes, and this kid thinks visually. They're not going to get the same grades. They're not going to do well in the same classes. There's so many different types of kids, and the schools do to this test. So this kid who's thinking theory is way beyond what that test is asking. Why on this inclined plane, I use this example in the book, they're not talking about friction and what the temperature is and what the humidity is and what these things are consist of and what the adherence rate is. And so how do they measure the slide by this formula? That doesn't make sense. Whereas the guy that just learns the formula gets an A, and the really smart kid goes, I don't even understand how they get that result, because he's thinking too complicated, and he gets a B or a C.
Right.
And that's frustrating for kids, but that's not necessarily this. This is...
Right. I just think it's important to acknowledge that it could be a piece, or it's a compounding piece.
It certainly could be, and especially the kid that, let's say you take a sensitive little kid like Dylan, and he's a nice kid, and he knows he's a nice kid, and his friends like him, but he's just being bullied, and no one's stopping it. He doesn't understand it.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
I'm smart, I'm here, I'm a nice kid. I don't understand it. Why is that kid the favorite one and everyone loves him and not me? And then that kid bullies him.
Right.
And that creates more anger. And,
right. Again, I'm just talking to a girl, hallway,
right.
Innocent, right? All of a sudden, that girl gets pushed into a locker.
Yes.
Like, are you a faggot lover, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So again, it's not even just you. It's like anything you touch or go near, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And that's real injustice. That's not perceived.
And that's humiliation too.
Right.
Because it's in front of your peers and in front of girls.
Right.
So now it's not only, wow, he's making me feel like a jerk. Now I look like a jerk.
Right.
And this is just all bad, and that's
right.
creating this hatred and this injustice. Yes.
Right. It's almost like at some level, if that kind of stuff happens, there's no escape, right? Because
I think you're putting this even better than I have.
You've got, because we were on the clock a few years, Randy. You remember what it was like in high school, but if you're a 15-year-old kid, right, like getting a date with a girl might be the greatest thing ever.
The only thing in the world.
Right. Okay. So I think we've covered, at least so far, in a nutshell, humiliation, right, as it pertains to this theory.
Yes, and I would like to add on that, when people say bullying, I almost like to substitute the word humiliation. Because bullying is almost a simplistic, this guy pushed me around. And that's different from pushing me around in front of my peers and in front of girls and in front of my friends, and they see that I can't do anything.
Right.
That's bullying and humiliation. That's humiliation.
Right.
That's a different thing.
Right, you mentioned too, again, we shouldn't look at this as a very kind of centric view, like only boys physically bully, right? There's emotional bullying.
So humiliation, and that creates hypervigilance, and that leads into, in some cases, where the kid that's been bullied and becomes hypervigilant. Now he's so hypersensitive to everything, and he decides he's going to fight back in little ways. This is the process of violentization. So he starts bumping into kids in the hallway, and he pulls tricks on the jocks. He lets air out of their tires. He paints their car. He puts glue in people's locks. He glues the locks to the school. All of these things Eric and Dylan did. They drive around and they shoot windows out of people's houses, even of their friends. It's like,
right.
What in the world? They decide to run missions and set bushes on fire and glue the locks on the door. They start to fight back in subtle ways.
Right.
And people go, oh, they're acting out. Yes, they're acting out. And not everyone is reacting to hypervigilance. Some kids just have fun doing stuff like that. They're being stupid kids. But that is a part of the process of violentization.
Right.
And then if they're mentored and shown other ways to be violent, which is movies and videos and the things you can find on the internet and about 2-man terrorist teams and
right.
3-man terrorist teams, which is all over the internet, so you can do that and never be discovered.
And it's every day. Again, I think the people miss about this, it's a daily thing, right?
It's a daily thing.
Right.
Especially when you're hypervigilant, it's a daily thing.
Right.
2 or 3 or 4 times a day. It's not once every 2 weeks. It's you're so attuned to the injustice that you see it in everything. You see it in this. He talks about this too, and I knew this, but Lonnie Athens talked about this. You see other people that are humiliated, and it affects you. It's you're taking in their humiliation, and I know that's an odd thing, but the arrogant bully people don't take in any of it. They're just arrogant and they're pushing people around.
Right.
And it's like, get out of my way,
right.
And they don't have the concept. But when you're hypervigilant and you've been humiliated, you see it all at some point, and so you're internalizing. Look at how he treated that guy.
Right.
Jerk. Look at how he treated that guy. And can you believe they treat us like this?
And look,
there's no redress.
Right. And look, we didn't say anything. Teacher just walked by.
Right.
Coach just walked by.
Right. And
that senior walked by. I'm a freshman. That senior walked by.
Yes. And exactly.
Right.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this is incredible.
It's not even just like the officials, but it's your peers, right? People that you respect and trust.
The teacher didn't say anything. Oh, but perfect
right.
point. Thank you.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, my team captain didn't say anything.
Yes. And why?
Because he got bullied.
Why isn't the senior in the class? Why isn't the team captain doing something about it?
Right.
Aren't I part of the team? No.
Right.
No, you're not.
Right.
Because you're not one of those. Actually, schools, the teachers ignore the bullies bullying the little kids, and it just continues and continues and continues. And people are afraid to stand up to them. Other high school kids can't stand up, but a teacher should, or the administration should, and action should be taken.
Right.
Or what are you teaching these kids?
Right.
What is allowed? Whatever the bully wants to get away with?
Right.
That's the example you've set for them. Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
And it's this little environment they're living in that is their whole world.
Right.
It's not the parents' whole world, it's their whole world.
Right. Now let's turn to hypervigilance.
Okay.
Right. So in your book, you often cite to Paul Mone's book, When a Child Kills, and you talk about Gavin de Becker's book, The Gift of Fear. Can you sort of tell listeners a little bit about a general sense of what it means to be hypervigilant, and more importantly, what you learned about the connection between humiliation and hypervigilance, and your sense from reading Mone's and de Becker's books?
Oh my gosh, there's so many examples in life of this. The girl is at home and her parents make fun of her hair, and her sister makes fun of her dress, and she goes to school, and 3 kids there make fun of her hair and tease her. She feels awful. She's being abused mentally, verbally. And that's where that girl will lose her self-image. She won't think her hair is good. She won't look good. She'll feel bad about herself. And if that continues and continues, that girl will be depressed and possibly suicidal and will react and take up different behaviors until she finds a world she fits into. That's hypervigilance. That's humiliation and hypervigilance. And so you take a boy, the same thing, and you take a boy who, I hate to use Eric as an example, but Eric had a caved-in chest, which was fixed surgically. But certainly, he never forgot that he had that deformity. It's an odd, unmanly, disappointing deformity.
Right.
And so now he's bullied, and he's verbally abused at home, possibly. And then he goes to school and he's verbally abused and he's teased and he's humiliated. Where is the love in his life? All he sees is hatred and anger and criticism. And he responds to that. He becomes hypervigilant. He becomes violent in return. And then I guess it's just a weird thing to say, where is the love? Where is the care for this kid? What makes him not be violent?
Right.
One of the things I learned after reading Eric's journals for so many years and really studying them and trying to understand it is Eric developed his world. Eric developed a violent world that he lived in, and he tuned himself to that, to weapons, to guns, to bombs, to violence, to killing, to violent video games, violent movies. Everything in his life was like, here are all the things to select from, and he selected from violence for everything. He created his own world of violence. And I mean, that I think is a defense mechanism for him.
Right.
I really do. If someone had taken his side and someone had said, you can't treat that kid like this, someone with authority especially, or if, let's say, the bullies, the bullies were not all the football players, but let's say the football team championed everyone in the school and didn't allow bullying, who would you love? You would love the football players. You would admire them. You wouldn't hate them because they would be championing you and stopping you from being bullied and stopping the whole school from being bullied.
Right.
And wouldn't that be an incredible environment to be in and learn?
Oh, absolutely.
And then if academics matter, that might actually be a high school I'd want to go to. But if a few of the football players are the bullies and the other football players are big physical guys, you add them all into the same group.
Right.
They're all the enemy. So that's hypervigilance, and that's the need. The need for revenge then is everybody.
Right. Right.
So
and it just takes one act or one person to almost shatter that worldview, right? In so many ways. That the second that one teacher or one coach or one senior says, hey, what the fuck you doing to that guy, dude? Like, you knocked that shit out.
Yes, I was going to argue with it because it doesn't take one act to create humiliation and hypervigilance.
Right.
That's continual.
Exactly.
It takes one act to stop it. I believe that absolutely.
Right.
One teacher goes in and goes, look, I'm not having this. And now here's the problem in the schools here and at Columbine, they would go, you two are fighting, you're both on suspension, you're both out of here 3 days. Even though one guy started and the other guy's going, why am I kicked out? Now that's another injustice to the kid being bullied.
Right.
They need to identify, look, you started this, you're in suspension, go about your day. If he bullies you again, you come and tell me, I will stop it. That would be incredible.
Right.
Because now there's some form of justice. This is why some private schools have a justice system inside their school.
Yeah.
They vote in this and they have a jury thing. And, so that you can have fairness and equality and
right, they have like mediation and arbitration.
Exactly.
Right.
But not at Columbine. The bullying happened at Columbine. No one intervened. The parents would take it to the principal. I took it to the principal in the administration and nothing was done. We took it to the police and nothing was done.
Right.
The police are in touch with Eric and Dylan's diversion counselor is Frank DeAndres at the school. We took it to the police. They should have been. Nothing was done from even that.
Right.
Now that's Eric and Dylan fighting back against the bullies, but we tried to stop the bullies at Frank's level and above, and we couldn't get anything done. If they won't listen to parents, they're not going to listen to stupid little kids.
Right.
What do the kids matter if the parents don't matter?
Right.
So, yes, if there's no justice, people will find a way to attain justice.
And especially, I think it all makes sense when you consider that. I'm not sure to what extent Eric was an justice collector before all this.
I believe he was.
But it seems like if you carry that through, right, and then that gets amplified on top of all this, I mean, that just makes sense.
Well, doesn't the concept of hypervigilance make you an injustice collector?
Absolutely.
Because again, you've internalized this. Everything you see is injustice. Everything you see them do to someone else, that makes you mad. It's not even you.
Right.
You see the bullying, you see the injustice because they're doing that to you, but it's over there. You're the bullied kid. You notice the bullied kid over there. You're the jock jerk here. You don't notice it over there. You don't care.
No.
Nah, you're busy working on whatever you're working on.
Right. And again, it's one of those things in which to start this process, you almost need to be on the receiving end as opposed to the giving end.
Right.
And so if you've never been on the other side of that situation, how could you sympathize or have insight?
Right. Oh,
Because
precisely.
who gives a shit, right? It doesn't matter to you
Precisely.
because you have no awareness, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Oh, what a great idea.
You know, it's funny too when I don't think I've ever been in a hypervigilant state, and I'm trying as I go throughout this process to understand what that's like, and it almost seems to me that I don't know. I don't want to go too far and say everything seems like an injustice, but maybe that's correct. Maybe that is what it means to be hypervigilant, because I'm thinking you're Eric and Dylan, and even the fact that that guy has a girlfriend and you don't, right?
Absolutely.
Like all these things just sort of like come together in a way that
Yes, absolutely, yes.
it's like I may not even talk to this guy. He just might be bigger or better looking or whatever, and now he has a girlfriend. Well, that's bullshit, right? He's like the rest of them.
And even more, let's take that to another thought.
Right.
When I'm hypervigilant to the point where I'm angry enough to want revenge, revenge isn't logical.
Right.
Revenge is anger, it's hatred. I hate. I don't care that this guy did it. He's a member of that team. He's a member of this school. I hate that. Revenge is illogical. They're expecting, they don't understand this to happening because they can't see that revenge is revenge. It's not logical.
Right.
I'm going to kill people.
Right.
And that's, Lonnie Athens talks about that. So do these other people. There's a point where you just decide, I'm going to be violent to show that I can handle it. I can
Right.
be it.
We talked about humiliation. We've talked about hypervigilance a little bit. Let's move into violentization. So, and again, these things are all kind of overlapped. But I think I want to talk about the process and talk about, in your book, you often talk about Lonnie Athens' book, The Creation of Dangerous Violent Criminals. Got that right in front of you.
Yes.
But you try to walk our listeners through like the process of violentization from like a 30,000 foot level, what that looks like.
Oh, I hate to do that, but actually, Rhodes spells it out so clearly, and I won't do it justice, but I will try.
Right.
Just because I don't want to be reading from the book. That's kind of. You've been humiliated so long, you decide. Some people decide, I'm going to get back at them. So now you start to become slightly violent. You learn methods of getting back. Again, you superglue the locks to their car. You puncture their tires. You set fire to bushes in front of their house. And those things, if no one stops them, they grow and you become more and more violent. So when kids say Eric and Dylan were bullies, at first I was like, you've got to be kidding. They're not actually saying that. They couldn't be bullies. They were pitiful.
Right.
Eric was 5'7", 125 pounds. Dylan was 6'4", 150, I think. And they couldn't beat up anybody.
Right.
So what these people saw when they said they were bullies is Eric and Dylan fighting back in small ways. They're trying to fight back and get some type of revenge and reestablish their manhood. And so that's what that process is. That's what, when people say they're bullies, that's what they're seeing. And they can't even understand it. They're so bullied from this end. They're fighting back in pitiful little ways, wearing dark trench coats and glasses and wearing gloves and acting all tough. And they couldn't beat up a cheerleader there. So it was for show. It was to get
Right.
back their self-image, their
And again, they're taking aspects of what they know, right? They're taking aspects from the movies they watch,
Yes.
or the music, right?
Yes.
Or they see Natural Born Killers, right? Or they see any of these movies, and that's what it means to be a man, right? That's what it means to be tough.
That's the example they're given.
Those guys don't take any shit. I want to be like that guy.
Anytime there's this level of injustice in a movie, someone's wife dies, someone's girlfriend gets killed, Vin Diesel or Death Wish, it doesn't matter what movie you know, Vin Diesel, The Man Alone, Vin Diesel, they go out and they get revenge and they kill 15 people and everything's better. That's the example we gave. And also because that's how angry young men can get. That's how they get them to fight in wars. You train them, this is the enemy, and you go teach them to kill people they don't even know. They're killing people they don't even know that have families and that are children of someone else because they've been trained to do that. That's why young men fight in wars. They're not old men. Old men go, why am I doing this?
Right.
Young men don't. They just go, it's aggressive. It's
Right.
part of being young.
We'll get into something else in a second, but you remind me of something pretty interesting. I remember, and I keep trying to avoid this part, but I almost keep making the connection between Eric and Dylan and Timothy McVeigh in a lot of ways. And what's interesting about what you just said, right, about young men in wars and old men, there's a really interesting part in that book, American Terrorist, that you've read, where McVeigh goes over there and he kills those people. And I think at one point he says, like, after that he kind of realized, like, you know, like, they're just people, what are we doing over here? It, like, shocked him back to reality a little bit after he pulled the trigger. And so,
People won't understand in anything you do explaining reasons why Tim McVeigh did what he did.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying,
they want to think Tim McVeigh is just evil. Tim McVeigh, just like everyone else, had motivations for what he did.
Right.
And if you want to read the book American Terrorist and understand his reasons and see it, certainly that makes sense to him, what he did.
Right.
He was angry about certain things that had happened and he got revenge.
Right.
And is that any different? There's Kathleen Maria talks about all these school shooters are domestic terrorists. I don't like that word because calling them terrorists means they're terrorists. They don't have a reason for what they do.
Right.
All these people have a reason for what they do.
Right.
There aren't crazy people that just go buy a weapon and decide to go. There just aren't crazy people like that. Now, yes, there are some people like that, but that's 1 in a million.
Right.
This is so common, even though it's rare. Humiliated, bullied children that go to get revenge at their school. That's not a terrorist.
Right.
That's a response to an injustice, and you're trying to get justice.
Right.
And in their mind, that's what they're doing.
Right.
And that's the hardest thing to grasp is our society to them is so wrong that they're doing this to get justice in their own little world.
Right.
And that realization is what allows you to go, okay, wait a minute. So if I look in the mirror, we have a violent society. We spend all this money on weapons and killing, and there's killing everywhere. It's in movies, it's in videos, it's in books, it's on the TV. 100 people get killed tonight on the television.
Right.
Let alone when you start watching police videos and there are 5 people killed every 5 minutes. It's crazy. We have this violent world, and we need to do something about that in general.
Right.
So.
No, I wouldn't disagree.
But that concept you need to get.
Right.
And I think the first thing that people need to get is the concept of our high school is toxic enough that these children are so bullied and humiliated that they go out to get revenge. That's how much they hate this school.
Right.
That means you need to change your school.
Right.
What is wrong with your society if, and I know this is all theoretical crap, but what is wrong with your society when 2 children hate a school enough to go blow it up? What is wrong with your society?
Right.
These 2 children hated the school enough, they went and planted bombs and killed innocent children there. We're not harmless and guiltless in that. What is wrong with our society to allow that? That's the question no one wants to ask. That's the hardest question. There's something wrong.
Right.
We don't teach Martin Luther King. We don't teach Gandhi. We don't teach love. We don't teach nonviolent protest. That's not what we do. We teach war and anger and blowing up a plane, yippee-ki-yay, with a lighter where he blows up the plane with everybody on board.
Right.
We teach it's okay to go out and because this guy's mugging someone in Death Wish to go shoot him in the back 3 times.
Dirty Harry.
Dirty Harry, the ridiculous Dirty Harry videos where that policeman shoots. Dirty Harry shoots on that street. That's in my book. It makes me crazy that people use that. That's the worst police shooting I've ever seen. It's so absolutely, well, other than Columbine, it's so absolutely ridiculous that he should have been fired for that on the spot.
Right, right.
He should have a desk job the rest of his life, and they make a hero out of it?
Right.
That was ridiculous. But that's the people we make heroes in our society.
Right.
Schwarzenegger goes and gets a machine gun and then kills 200 people in a fight, and he's invincible. And oh my gosh. So yes.
No, you're absolutely right.
That's the lesson.
I only smile because I love the Die Hard movies.
Me too.
But I see 100% your point. Right. Right.
Yes, that's the Die Hard movie where they're getting away in the plane. and the fuel's leaking and ridiculous. He lights the runway on fire.
Yeah, it's so
and of course that catches a plane going 180 miles an hour.
Yeah, as it's taking off, the flame goes with the plane up in the air up to the jet fuel.
That's exactly how it works. And of course, the pilots were terrorists, and everyone on the plane was an absolute evil terrorist.
Yeah.
And he had the right to condemn them all to death.
Right, and again, right at the end, he gets the girl.
Right.
He gets the awards. He's a movie star.
That's just how it happens.
Right.
Eric believed it.
So I think what I want to do now is we've gone through sort of the framework we have laid out for this whole thing, right? At some level, if I had to boil down what you're saying to our listeners, it seems that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that it goes bullying leads to humiliation, humiliation leads to hypervigilance, hypervigilance leads to violentization, and violentization inevitably leads to violence.
The final part of the process of violentization is a decision to be violent.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And I had never heard of these concepts before. After Columbine, I tried to find out why this would happen. I read psychology things and psychiatric magazines, and I read Jung, and I mean everything. I couldn't find anything that related to it until I found, I can't remember which was the first book.
Paul Mone's.
I think it was Paul Mone's book, When a Child Kills, and that was like, what in the world? This makes absolute sense. It fits. And then Gilligan's book supported it, and then Athens' book supported it, and then James Garbarino writes books about it. But people don't know about these books. They don't know about the Becker's books on the gift of fear and protecting the gift.
Right.
2 books he wrote on that's having the awareness of when a situation is dangerous and acting on it.
Right.
Judy had that with these kids. She knew Eric was dangerous.
Right.
I didn't know that Eric was as dangerous as he turned out to be. Oh my gosh.
Right, and I wonder what it says about our refusal in a lot of ways to take a hard look at ourselves in the mirror if the books we read are, well, no offense to Dave Cullen, but Dave Cullen's Columbine, Sue Klebold's interpretation, right? These sort of interpretations that don't take a hard enough look.
Well, and look at those books and the books that, not denigrating the fact that they're popular, but Cullen's book took the police point of view, and it's not about bullying, it's that they're crazy. Crazy's easy. I don't have to think about it.
Right.
They're crazy, but I don't have to worry about it. And if someone else is crazy, I can't do anything about that. They're crazy. I don't have to change myself, change my life. I don't have to look at my world. They're just crazy.
Right.
They're here in this compartment, and I have nothing to do with it.
Right.
That's the easy way. The hard way is to look in the mirror and go, we live in a violent society, and these kids were bullied, and no one protected them, and they, through the process of violentization, they decided to become violent in return, and they got revenge, and now that's hard. Now we've got to look in the mirror and go, what is wrong with our world that these 2 kids were so bullied in this high school that it would make them kill people, and we have something to do with it.
Right.
No one wants that point of view.
Right.
That's hard.
Right.
When you're the kid that's being bullied and in pain, you notice it. You feel it. You feel you're belittled, you're emasculated, you're made fun of, you're humiliated every day. The bullies and the arrogant people might only be a few people, but it looks like everyone else is the people that are belittling and humiliating you. They're not, they don't notice it because they're not in pain. You're in pain.
Right.
That's what these kids were. They were bullied to that point. They were humiliated.
And again, I think it's a really important point you make in your book, and it almost seems like it's obvious, right? But at some level, Columbine's not some Amish schoolhouse of 20 people. It's 2,000 kids.
Right.
Right, a sea of kids. My high school was that big. You don't even know half the kids.
Yes.
And right again, that idea in which it might just be 8, 9, 10 people who are the real perpetrators who are really abusing you. But then again, when you're lost in the sea of everyone else.
Right. Let's say it's 3 kids.
Right.
Or 4. You can't do anything about 4 bullies.
Right. You're
a skinny little 125-pound kid or 153-pound 6'4" kid.
Right.
And they're humiliating, throwing bottles at you, pushing you down in the halls, calling you faggot, calling you names, being abusive to you every day. You see them doing it to everybody else. It's an injustice that at some point your hypervigilance will bring to a point where through violentization, the process of you become angry enough where you decide to do something about it.
Right.
And that is the concept here that people need to learn. That's what creates these.
Right. And so I think we've done a really good job explaining those concepts.
Okay, good.
So what I want to do is let's turn back to Columbine for a little bit, and let's try to tie all these concepts together to our listeners who, again, may or may not be familiar with the story. And let's try to flesh out a little bit of these concepts to Eric and Dylan.
Okay.
If that's okay. Like we talked about this a little bit before, and you do a good job in your book, but let's try to talk about that point in which you think Eric and Dylan may have made a decision. And again, I don't think these points in the story are static, right? I don't think like on March 1st of this year, this is when they decided. I think it's more of a fluid process.
Yes.
But I think what you're getting at in a lot of ways is like, for example, when Dylan's in the restaurant with Sue, and he won't take off the glasses, and he's wearing the duster, and he finally feels the first time he's tough.
Right.
Right? Or Eric is
intimidating people.
Right, or Eric is the gun.
It's a sense of power.
Right. So I'm trying to figure out if maybe we can just lay out a few examples for our listeners of times you think that you can see Eric and Dylan maybe moving through this process a little bit.
I wasn't ready for this. I didn't plan on anything, but they're running missions and getting their enemies, whatever level enemies they are. They set fire to some kid's bushes in front of his house. They superglued the locks of his door. They superglued cars, put superglue into keys. They superglued the doors of the school. They set firecrackers off on our porch. They shot a window in our house out with a paintball gun. And Brooks wasn't even an enemy. Brooks wasn't even a bully. They just did that. They're running missions against their so-called enemies. They're really one step away from friends, but they're not going after the bullies. They're not going up to the bully's house. They know where he lives. They know what his car looks like. They're not doing it to his car. This is acting out and setting up okay, I can be violent, I can do these things, I'm getting away with it. And that process develops into them deciding to get revenge.
Right, and it seems like in a lot of ways in your book you talk about this too, but the more and more they get involved in this stuff, and the more they become isolated with each other.
Yes.
Like that whole process itself escalates.
Them as a team, they're going to do this, and they have this plan, and they're both working toward this plan, saving money, getting the fireworks at the fireworks stand they work at, buying the bombs, preparing the pipe bombs, buying weapons, asking for weapons, purchasing ammunitions. It's a plan, and it's just like a pact that essentially terrorists do. They decide, the three of them decide to get back at whatever they're getting at,
right?
Which is the three terrorists. I mean, they're not really groups, sometimes groups of three, but in this case it's two, and the two of them go out and it's a little secret pact, and there's power in that. Together they're doing this, and then they see this kid being bullied, and all they need, they exchange glances. It's like, see what's going on?
Yeah.
And that motivates them further.
Right.
Yes.
And again, like we talked about, if there's no let up, right? If no one ever puts their foot off the gas and no one steps in, then no one's going to stop that from ultimately.
And what is needed at that point is someone to come in and stop the humiliation,
right?
Protect them, make them feel protected, and then their anger is stopped.
Right.
If you protect them and you take away that danger, then they're not hypervigilant. It goes away. And he says it in here. This incredible psychologist who dealt with criminals says exactly the same thing.
Right.
And so does Gilligan and other people too. So that goes into, if you want to stop a school shooting, you can have a guard at the school at every entrance, armed with his gun cocked and loaded with one in the chamber, waiting for someone at every door all day long to stop a school shooting. Because they're going to be angry kids at some school, or you're going to arm teachers. So there are weapons all over the school now.
Right.
Teachers with concealed carry weapons. And people are going to know who that is. Kids aren't stupid.
Right.
The guy's going to show off his weapon. There are going to be accidental discharges like there already are, like the FBI agent that was down at a bar in town and did a backflip, and the gun fell out of his belt, and he fired it, picked it up by the trigger, which is like the worst possible thing you ever do as a gun owner, and shot a guy in the leg in a bar. That happened. It's a trained FBI agent did that in a bar in Denver. So that's a trained FBI agent, not a Bob the biology teacher either. So you're going to arm teachers, and you're going to have a school become a fortified zone, okay? And you still have to stop the kid before he walks into the school with that weapon. At Arapahoe High School, Carl walked into that school with a shotgun, and he shot Claire sitting on the ground. The first thing he did was kill her. He was in the school for 5 seconds. Nothing can be done to stop that. Isn't that an awful thing? And that loss of life is absolutely tragic and preventable. You want to stop school shootings, you stop the humiliation in the school, you take away the anger so that these kids aren't violent. You take away their anger so they don't have to go to school to get revenge. And you're going to stop the depressed kids and the suicidal kids a little bit of that. You're going to stop the humiliation so that these kids aren't belittled and they don't carry this hatred of the high school and this hatred of themselves for their whole lives either.
Right.
And you know, look at where girls commit suicide because they're something they did online and they teased online. That's the power of peer pressure and peer criticism. So think of what it does in the school when it's in person and it's all these people laughing at you and girls making fun of you and whatever.
Right.
But that's if you want to stop school shootings, I think that's the first step. At the very least, you make school a more peaceful place. It's not full of bullying and humiliation. It doesn't create school shooters. It's creating more friends. It's creating a nonviolent situation.
Right.
At the very least, everyone's going to enjoy school more. So there's no downside to it. There's certainly a downside to arming every teacher and having 5 policemen at the doors. You can't live in a world like that, where you have 3 policemen at the school with AR-15s, armed and ready. Who wants to live in that world? That's Israel, Palestine.
Right. At some level, it's the total inverse, right? We're trying to actually make these kids feel a little bit less on edge.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It's not the opposite where you crank down all of a sudden and say, look, because in our minds, or the argument is that because we can't account for crazy, because we can't account for these things that don't make sense in our status quo, then we just have to militarize.
Yes.
But again, it just seems like if what you're trying to do is take your foot off the gas in terms of making these kids feel less on edge.
And then, of course, have a program like Safe to Tell, which Colorado has, where you can call this 800 number for Safe to Tell in Colorado, and they will take the information. And I'm not sure what they're doing now. I think they've changed the program slightly, but they used to send a detective to that school and investigate. And that put the principal and the administration on notice.
Right.
We know something's going on here. We want to deal with this. We don't want this to go. There's a possible threat here, and then they should train the staff in methods to stop the humiliation, to stop the bullying. I don't know that they do that, but that certainly would be helpful. And then make it a positive thing to report a kid that's threatening violence that has access to weapons. That's a valid threat. If you want to really know what a valid threat is, that's what it is. If he's threatening violence, he or she, and they have access to weapons, that's a valid threat.
Right.
Now, an invalid threat, I'm going to kill you, and you have no access to weapons, and it's, you're just angry.
Sure.
You don't have to follow up. I mean, you can follow up on that, but you don't have to investigate that.
Right.
But that kid said he's going to kill the school, and he's got 7 guns in his house. What? He's got a hit list, and he has a weapon.
Right.
That's a valid threat.
Absolutely.
That needs to be investigated.
Right.
So, yes, investigate those, but stop the humiliation, stop the bullying.
Okay. So let's now speak directly to any teachers or administrative officials or coaches. What would you say to them in terms of what is the role they can play? We've gone over this a little bit, right? But again, you're trying to speak to these people who may have been doing this job for 10 years, 20 years. I don't need Randy Brown telling me how to do my job kind of thing.
The first thing I would say is they won't like this. Take your level of arrogance that you have now. Take your best football player, you're in high school, and put him in a college team and see how they beat the hell out of him and how he can't compete. And then take the best college player and put him in a pro team and see how he's an amateur in a pro team. And realize that the level of arrogance you have is only because you're in a high school or you're in a college. You're arrogant in the college, or you're arrogant in this. And realize that it isn't necessarily about winning only and dominating and hurting people and teaching your kids to scratch the other football players' eyes when you're in the football game during the play.
Yeah.
And the things, and not falling on their legs so you injure their leg. That this is a competition, and it's not that important. It's football, and I would say that to everybody. School should be about academics and about teaching children to get along and what's going to go. Oh, sure, give everyone a trophy. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there has to be a level of fairness for everybody.
So let's take that same question, but let's apply it to, let's say fellow students might be listening to this, right? Someone's peers, right? Kids who are students right now might be hearing this. What would you say to them in terms of they might not think that they can have the same impact, let's say their teacher could have, right? Or the coach could have. What can they do to diffuse things like this?
Wow, that's a really tough one, because the truth is, if there are, let's say there are 3 bullies in a school, everyone is afraid of them. No one can stop them.
Right.
You would need 4 other strong kids to take on the 3 bullies, and you'd have to be more aggressive than they are, and that's why they're the bullies. They don't even know they're aggressive. They are. I don't know the answer to that question. I
Right.
think that has to come from the top. The principal needs to, in the beginning of the year, say, this school is about academics, and yes, we play football and basketball and we play other sports, but we're all a team here and we all get along, and there will be no bullying or humiliation. Now, you can tease your friends all you want. This is not a zero tolerance policy.
Right.
Tease your friends, have fun, but there will be no physical violence and there will be no abuse or humiliation.
Right.
You have to be reasonable with each other. I don't know what I would tell those kids. I would say,
You mentioned the text to tip thing, right? In terms of, right, where so you can reach out anonymously.
oh, safe to tell.
Right.
So I would say safe to tell would be, if safe to tell is still operating at the level that I hope it is, where they send a detective out. What was neat about it is they used to send, was it a state patrolman out to investigate, and so it wasn't the local law enforcement guy.
Right.
It was a third party, and he could step in and say, look, this is the report we got. You're not doing your job as the school resource officer. You're fooling around, and
Right.
you need, and you're not doing your job. And now I don't know that they ever say anything like that. I doubt they're that honest with these people.
Right, but still.
But they're at least putting the school district on notice that this is being investigated and something's wrong.
Right.
And then hopefully the school district steps up.
Right.
But I think that safe to tell is the answer. I would report things, bullying like that.
Right.
And see if they do something about it.
Because you think about, right, at some level, like, if there's 2,000 kids in a school, let's say, right?
Right.
There's maybe what, 200 teachers? Right? I'm thinking in terms of people who are on the front lines of this every day.
Yes.
More often than not, it's going to be fellow students, right? Who might see certain things where teachers might not.
I agree.
Just in terms of, like, look, teachers they're not eyes and ears everywhere.
Fellow students certainly would.
Right. So I think encouraging kids to reach out those ways.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Right. And again, I think what you're saying is in terms of it needs to start at the beginning before things get too crazy down
Yes.
the line.
Break that chain.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And then he says that in here so many times. Whatever level in the violentization process you're at, if you stop it at that point, it doesn't go further.
Right.
It stops. So take away the humiliation. Stop the anger.
Let's say there's kids who might be listening to this right now who might not necessarily be in a good place.
This is the best question you've asked so far, so let me answer that. This is the mistake that Eric and Dylan made. Eric and Dylan were bullied and saw it, and they tried to get revenge. This is the mistake that other school shooters make. They become what they hate. They take things they see, and they hate it so much that they fight back, and they become bigger bullies than the bullies that they go after. They create more pain and hate and sadness than they've ever been through. That's the mistake. That's not how you fight this. Become the thing you love. Become the thing you admire. Become the pacifist who becomes the principal of the school and enacts policies to stop this. That's the whole purpose for your whole life. You've made the world better. You haven't made the world worse. Eric and Dylan made the world worse.
Right.
They showed kids how to kill, and they gave them that example. They became the things they hated. The real lesson is to become the thing you love.
Right.
Become the thing you admire. Change it from the inside. Be better. Stop the bullying somehow. Don't make people's lives worse. Don't go kill innocent children because you're upset.
Right.
Because you've internalized all this humiliation and pain.
Right.
That's and so if you're an abused child in a home, don't kill your parents. When you're old enough, get out of that household and don't ever abuse anybody, and make your life about stopping abuse in homes. You want to give a meaning to your life, make the world better. Don't make the world worse.
Right.
That's the message of Gandhi and Martin Luther King and really few people that we hear about now. But make the world better. Don't make the world worse by creating more pain and hatred. The things that Eric and Dylan did, that these kids so admire because they think they stood up against the bullies. Eric and Dylan became the biggest bullies. They became the worst example of what they hated.
Right.
What an awful thing to do with your life to do that, and to kill innocent children violently with the coldness and cruelty they did. They could have, with a little guidance or with just a little thought, they could have become the things they loved, become the things they admired. They could have changed the world for the better. They could have said, this is wrong. I will do something about this, but I'll do it in a nonviolent way. That if they'd said that, the world would be a better place, and so many people wouldn't have died and been unhappy. And
right.
What a difference they could have made in the world.
I mean, I was going to ask, not touch on specifics, but just to kind of get at this idea of, again, seeing the end result of this as applied to Eric and Dylan,
yes,
and figuring out to what extent they themselves are bullies in the last hour or so of their life to kids, right? But that's really dark, and I don't want to go there.
No, let's cover that. You can decide whether you use it or not. Let's talk about the last 15 minutes in their lives.
Okay.
They've killed innocent children with such extreme violence that I can barely even think about the way they did it. It's so horrible. And then Eric killed Dylan. Dylan did this to support Eric and to be Eric's backup man, and because Dylan was hyper vigilant and angry too. Eric and Dylan did this together, and Dylan is so misguided. He's trusting Eric, and they're doing this together, and Eric kills Dylan in the end. So if you have a partner that you're doing this with, you have a level of trust I don't think that you can rely on.
Right.
If Eric will kill Dylan in cold blood when he's through with him, Dylan is found on the ground with the gun wrapped in his right hand here, okay? Wrapped tightly in these three fingers. His technique is in that hand.
Right.
And he's supposed to have shot himself here in the left temple with it exiting here. You cannot get a Tech 9 in that position. It's not possible. You shoot yourself and you're dead. You shoot yourself, and it's in his right hand. He's left-handed, the gun's in his right hand. You shoot yourself like this.
Right.
You don't shoot yourself like you can't even do it
right.
physically.
Right.
So his suicide it's an impossibility.
Right.
It's absurd.
Right.
They left that inconclusive, and whatever that coroner's guy's name was, because I believe that if you show that Eric killed Dylan, the Klebolds actually have a lawsuit against the sheriff too.
Right.
But the worst part of that is it creates this mystique, the myth of then they killed him and committed suicide. So two guys are going to go in and kill children and commit suicide. That's not what happened in Columbine.
Right.
They went in and they did this, and then Eric killed Dylan. Eric was standing here. I believe Dylan was sitting in a chair, and Eric shot him with the high-tech rifle right here. So I could say a couple things to potential school shooters. The first I would say is if you're thinking of doing this, and if this is valid, that you've been bullied or humiliated and you're hypervigilant and now you're in the process of getting revenge, that you step back from the situation and remove yourself from the situation.
Right.
You're 17 or 18 years old. You're in a situation that is awful. Find a way to get out of that situation. Go get help. Go talk to a counselor. Go talk to a policeman. Go talk to your uncle who lives in another city. Go talk to a relative. Find another place to live. Move out of that high school. Talk to your parents. Tell them the bullying you're going through. There must be some way you can get help for this situation. And if there isn't, then listen to this weird thought. Because in 2 years, or in 5 years, or in 8 years, or in 20 years, you're going to look back on this and you're going to go, it was stupid high school. Why did I do this? High school doesn't matter. None of this stuff matters. Why was I all upset over that crap? There's so much more to life. Look at the things I've learned and the things I've experienced since stupid high school.
Right.
High school, it's so important then, but after a while it doesn't mean anything. All that anger I felt, all that bullying and humiliation, it's silly.
Right.
there's so much more to life. Go out and find those things in life. Hike in the mountains. Go to Fiji. Go to California and learn to surf. I mean, find something.
Right.
Go skiing. Go find something to give meaning to your life.
I think we're good. I think we got a lot. I think that this might be good for today or forever. Like, I think we got everything we need.
Good, because I am getting tired.
You know, I was just thinking for a second, right? Like, and this is almost sad to think about, but man, if Dylan could have waited like 3 months, you know what a good time he could have had in Arizona?
Oh my gosh. And what if he found a girlfriend in Arizona who really liked him?
Oh, yeah.
You know, Dylan was a nice
You know how many
kid.
beautiful girls go to that school?
And he was a little bit clumsy, but he was cute and he was nice. And,
Oh, yeah.
And he's tall. And so you meet the right girl. Done this. Eric could have grown up, gone in the Marines, found out, wow, this is tough.
Yeah, it sucks.
It might have toughened him up a little bit. And maybe he would have a little more confidence and he wouldn't have done this. And,
Right.
And might have come out and been just a good person.
Get out of this folks' place. Get away from here.
Yes.
Right, diffuse things. But again, I was thinking about Dylan. I've been to U of A, and I've had friends who've gone there, and just the parties and the girls. It's a really cool place, man. It's not like he was going off to some boys' school in the middle of Montana.
And just think if he'd gone down there, he was shy, and just given it a little time, just to develop a little confidence, it could have changed his entire life. Cool.
Yeah. Well, that was awesome, Randy. Really appreciate it.
That went well, I think.
Do you feel good about it?
Yes, I do.
Right.
I'm tired. That went good, but I'm tired. Wow.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry about that.
Oh my gosh, it's 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
This took you all day. Holy mackerel.
No. Again, Judy's probably upstairs, like just seething. Like, will this guy?
She's downstairs working. Judy!
Here.
Judy? Well, did she go out back? I didn't even notice.
I thought didn't she take her coffee and go that way?
Yeah, let me see if she's sitting out back. Oh, were you taking a nap? Oh. Yeah, you want to do your interview now? I'm kidding.